In the shadows of Sunderland, England, tragedy struck as 7-year-old Nikki Allan was forcefully taken from her home on October 7, 1992. Thus began a 3-decade struggle for justice, a relentless battle fueled by a mother's love. Wrongful accusations plagued the case, delaying the identification of the true killer. But secrets, lies, and a web of deception couldn't withstand the unyielding pursuit of truth. How did the criminal evade justice for over 30 long years? And when justice came, was it enough? In 1992, Sunderland, a city located in the northeast of England, faced a challenging situation with its shipyards closing down and its coal mine on the verge of being shut down. Despite some positive developments like a car factory and a university campus, there was resistance to change and a desire to hold on to the past. The region also struggled with high rates of car thefts, especially involving young offenders who became notorious figures in the media. Unemployment was high in certain areas, with some housing estates falling into disrepair. One such estate, called Garth, faced issues with difficult tenants. Overall, the city was caught between a desire for progress and a reluctance to let go of its industrial past. And this is where the Allan family lived. On October 7, 1992, a Wednesday, Nikki attended school as usual. When she returned home in the evening, she found her mother Sharon overwhelmed with laundry. Feeling unwell and wanting to escape the noise and steam from the dryers, Sharon decided to visit Jenny, her stepmother, hoping to find some painkillers. Zara and Naomi, Nikki's sisters, were already asleep, while Stacy was engrossed in watching television. However, Nikki insisted on accompanying her mother to Jenny's. Upon arrival, Nikki's grandfather, Dickie Prest, was vacuuming and refused to stop despite Nikki's fear of the noise. Frightened, Nikki ran back home, which was just 2 blocks away. Her mother promised to follow shortly after. It was around 8:30 p.m. when Nikki decided to go home alone. Garth, the area they lived in, was a secure space where children often played outside until late in the evening. Tragically, Nikki was taken within mere moments of leaving her grandfather's house. To reach their flat from her grandfather's place, Nikki only had to walk down a flight of stairs and then along a short lane, which would take a maximum of 5 minutes. Since they'd been living there for a while and it was in the same building, Sharon didn't consider it particularly dangerous. Sharon left around 10 minutes after Nikki. However, upon Sharon's return home, Nikki was nowhere to be found. Realizing that Nikki was missing, Sharon began knocking on doors frantically. Concerned neighbors came out to offer assistance, and the police were called. A police helicopter was also called so that it could give the police a view from the above and search for the girl. By the time the helicopter arrived, Sharon was in such distress that she was taken to her father, Dickie's flat, where she received tranquilizers. In her heavily sedated condition, she couldn't move and could only hear whispers around her. Troubling thoughts crossed her mind that maybe Nikki had fallen into the river. Maybe she went to the docks with a friend, fell in, and the friend was too scared to confess. The following morning, Nikki's shoes and coat were discovered in an abandoned building known as the Quayside, just a few yards away from the flats where Nikki, her grandfather, and her mother resided. The building had fallen into disrepair, was covered in graffiti, and was generally avoided by people. Overwhelmed by distress, Sharon's condition became severe enough that someone called for an ambulance. At that time, Gail and Vina were Sharon's neighbors. Gail was Sharon's sister, while Vina was her real mother. Although Vina and Sharon were not on speaking terms, Gail offered to accompany Sharon to the hospital, but unexpectedly, Vina appeared at the ambulance door, pushing Gail aside. Despite their strained relationship, Vina took charge. Once at the hospital, Sharon received additional diazepam to help calm her. Meanwhile, both the police and the local community had been notified of Nikki's abandoned shoes and coat, prompting them to investigate the derelict building. On October 8th at 10:40 a.m., a teenage boy made a tragic discovery in the basement. A lifeless Nikki, lying in a pool of her own blood. Despite being fully clothed, except for her missing shoes and coat, Nikki had suffered 37 stab wounds and had suffered blunt force trauma to the head. Heartbreakingly, Nikki's grandfather was the one who had to identify her lifeless body. By that time, Sharon had returned from the hospital and found herself in a bedroom of a high-rise building in Sunderland with Vina. On October 9th, the police determined that a house brick was the weapon used to strike Nikki on the head, leading to her demise. They believed that this caused her death rather than the stab wounds inflicted. The same day, A man covered in blood was apprehended, but later released without charges. By October 12th, an artist released a sketch of a man who was reportedly the last person seen with Nikki before her murder. The image was shared with the media and the public by the police in hopes of generating leads. On October 13th, a photograph of Nikki wearing the clothes she had on the night that she disappeared and was killed was released to the public. The authorities sought any information from individuals who may have seen her with someone. Desperate for any leads, the police shared all available information. A reconstruction of Nikki's last known movements was conducted on October 14th, aiming to assist the search for her killer. Just 4 days later, on October 18th, a significant breakthrough occurred when the police made their first major arrest. Less than 2 weeks after the discovery of Nikki's body, a local man named George Heron, 24 years old, was taken into custody. He'd recently moved into the Garce area a few months prior. George, locally known as the eccentric oddball, had a regular presence in the derelict building where Nikki's lifeless body was discovered. Despite minimal evidence pointing directly to his guilt, the community swiftly focused their suspicions on him, convinced that he was the one responsible for Nikki's murder. Amidst this chaotic situation, on October 30th, 1992, Nikki Allan was laid to rest at Sunderland Cemetery. After Nikki's burial, the investigation into her murder persisted. George Heron, who'd recently moved in with his sister just weeks before the tragic incident, initially denied knowing Nikki when questioned by the police. However, several locals came forward, asserting that they had witnessed George in the company of Nikki on multiple occasions. The nature of their interactions remains unclear, as children often played freely without close parental supervision in the area surrounding the flats. Additional evidence emerged during the investigation. A knife blade discovered in George's residence matched the stab wounds found on Nikki's body. Furthermore, blood splatter was detected on his shoes and clothes, although the significance of this discovery remains uncertain. Given that this occurred in 1992, DNA testing wasn't as advanced as it is today, so this splatter couldn't be tested. Significantly, George's sister informed the police that on the night of Nikki's murder, George returned home and immediately proceeded to the bathroom to wash his clothes. He devoted around half an hour to cleansing himself and his garments, which struck his sister as highly unusual behavior as it deviated from his normal routine. Initially, George denied venturing out that evening. However, eyewitness testimonies from locals surfaced, placing him at the local pub where he purchased cheese and onion crisps, known to be Nikki's favorite snack. The police believe that George used these crisps as a lure to entice Nikki into the abandoned building where she was tragically killed. Following 3 days of intensive police questioning, George ultimately confessed to the murder of Nikki, shedding light on the harrowing truth behind her untimely demise. Jen Jarvie was a private investigator. She'd be supporting Sharon over the coming years, and she claimed that the way in which the police questioned George was in itself shady.
I'm Jen Jarvie. I'm a private investigator and lecturer in professional policing, and I have reviewed the Nikki Allan case. The police have a difficult job. They have a difficult job to do, and particularly with a child murder. However, in this particular case, they failed Sharon. They failed Nikki, monumentally to begin with, but then continue to do that for a lot of years. They had an ideal suspect there, and they failed to pinpoint him time and time again. The difference, which is usually the case in most cold cases, is the fact that they were able to progress forensics and DNA, and were able to actually pinpoint DNA on Nikki's body that belonged categorically to David Boyd.
A year later, in October 1993, George's trial commenced in Leeds. Initially intended to be held in Sunderland, concerns arose about the possibility of George not receiving a fair trial due to the intense anger and hostility within the community. Threats of murder and lynching directed towards him were prevalent, as evidenced by newspaper articles documenting the community's vengeful desires. To mitigate these risks, the trial was relocated to Leeds, with the hope that the change in location would dissuade locals from attending and inciting further disturbances. However, contrary to expectations, the distance proved to be no deterrent. Locals defied the geographical barrier, making the journey to Leeds daily to witness the trial proceedings. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was tumultuous. Spectators had to be restrained as they shouted and displayed unruly behavior. The trial unfolded in a chaotic manner, reflecting the charged emotions surrounding the case. Notably, members of Nikki's extended family also attended these trials, seeking justice for their lost loved one. After reviewing all 12 interview tapes, the judge presiding over George's case determined that 7 of them could not be used as evidence due to the police employing questionable methods to extract a confession. This ruling occurred as a result of the extensive and controversial tactics employed during the interrogation process, which cast doubt on the reliability of the recorded statements. Following a 6-week trial, due to the questionable evidence, the case was labeled a mistrial, and the judge instructed the jury to deliver a not guilty verdict, which instantly sparked chaos within the courtroom. The scene erupted with screams, shouts, and emotional outbursts. Sharon, overcome by the shocking decision, fainted amongst the turmoil. The intense reaction from the public necessitated the intervention of security personnel to restore order. Even the judge had to be swiftly escorted from the courtroom. The aftermath of the verdict was met with outrage, particularly because many firmly believed in George's guilt. In light of the volatile situation, George was granted a change of identity and relocated away from Sunderland. This decision further fueled public anger. Unleashing their frustration, an act of arson targeted the solicitor's office involved in the case. Another uncomforting revelation emerged, shedding light on potential police corruption. So, in between the trials, Sharon received an invitation to visit a prison and personally express gratitude to an individual who had inflicted permanent scars on George's face, allegedly as an act of retribution. After that, since 1993, no one had been charged with the murder of Nikki Allan. The case would remain cold for years to come. But after these trials, George's life completely took a turn. George had experienced his fair share of being picked on during his life. When he was attending primary school, his parents went through a divorce, and his mother, Sue, moved in with Alex Heron. George managed to form a positive bond with his new stepfather. However, tragedy struck when Alex passed away from a heart attack when George was just 9 years old. This event had a profound impact on him, shaping his demeanor as he grew older. When 11-year-old George enrolled at St. Aidan's, a boys' secondary school administered by the Christian Brothers, he'd already been labeled as an outsider. An incident that further solidified this reputation occurred when George arrived at class one morning, still wearing the hood of his duffel coat. Despite the teacher's request to remove it, he adamantly refused. In response, the teacher forcefully pulled off the hood, inadvertently revealing a scraped and bloodied scalp underneath. Rumor had it that George's hair had been forcibly shaved as a punishment for his poor academic performance. Subsequently, some of his fellow students started referring to him as E.T., alluding to the resemblance between his wide eyes and the fictional extraterrestrial alien from Steven Spielberg's film E.T. At the time of Nikki's murder, George resided in Waregarth with his younger sister, the 19-year-old Michelle, her boyfriend Darren Psycho Baker, and her 2 children. Although he initially claimed not to know Nikki when questioned by the authorities, there was a degree of familiarity between them. On occasions, Nikki would play with George's nephew, and he'd even offered her sweets. Joe Bradley, a retired constable now, had taken care of George Heron between police interviews. Their conversation revealed how deeply the belief in a suspect's guilt could permeate an entire police force. It was expected that officers responsible for watching over prisoners would try to establish rapport with them and provide feedback to the Criminal Investigation Department, or the CID. Although anything discussed outside the confines of the interview room would be inadmissible in court, it could still be utilized as ammunition. Initially, Bradley struggled to get any response from George. However, after some time, he decided to offer him a cup of hot chocolate, which seemed to break the ice. George began to open up, expressing concerns about what would happen to him. Bradley reassured him, stating that if he hadn't committed the crime, he had nothing to worry about. George, though, mentioned that others were accusing him of the murder. Bradley advised him not to pay attention to the accusations, emphasizing that if he was innocent, he should disregard them. However, Bradley also warned him that if he was truly responsible, he needed to stop evading the truth and start cooperating with the investigators, as forensic evidence would eventually reveal the truth. Bradley believed that George was on the verge of confessing, but after a significant pause, he denied his involvement. Shortly afterward, Bradley received word that George had, in fact, confessed to the crime. During George's initial appearance at Sunderland Magistrates Court, Bradley found himself in the dock alongside him. From the public gallery, a man suddenly lunged towards George, prompting Bradley to swiftly subdue him. As the commotion unfolded, a woman at ground level screamed, identifying George as the father of some child and a murderer. Bradley observed the man's tears and, moved by compassion, embraced him tightly, offering solace. After the hearing, Bradley accompanied George to Durham Jail. In an effort to shield him from the intrusive camera lenses of photographers, they placed a blanket over his head and instructed him to lie down inside the van. As they departed, George inquired if he could sit up, but one of the senior officers insisted that he remained covered, viewing him as a child murderer. Bradley firmly believed in George's guilt, as he'd been informed by higher-ranking officers that his confession aligned with the forensic evidence. However, Heron's confession only matched the investigators' desired narrative because they'd manipulated him into providing the desired account. This conversation occurred later on the second day, after George had already confessed to Detective Chief Inspector John Renwick and Detective Inspector Colin Dudley, who'd taken over the questioning from other officers. Throughout the exchange, you can hear them guiding George towards the answers they wanted to hear. When George suggests using a metal bar as the weapon, they indicate that it's the wrong response, subtly implying the idea that a knife might be the correct one.
George, how are you, son? Just finish it off and tell us what you did.
I went to throttle her.
You went to throttle her? What with?
Me hands.
But you hit her with something else, didn't you, George?
I don't remember.
George, think. I know it's not very nice, son, but just think. What else did you hit her with? George?
Fist.
What else? Howie, George, you used something else, didn't you? George, we know. Howie, George, what else did you do? Come on.
Piece of metal.
If they hadn't already formed their own conclusions, they might have noticed that their sole suspect seemed unaware of certain details regarding the murder he claimed to have committed. For instance, when he initially mentioned using a piece of metal, he told the officers he'd inserted it between Nikki's legs, despite there being no evidence of that kind of assault. Later, the detectives got George to tell them how many times he stabbed Nikki. Renwick and Dudley alternate between scolding and comforting Heron. They bring him down and then assert that they're the only ones who truly understand him. They employ tactics that appeal to his Catholic faith, questioning his beliefs about heaven and hell. They try to redirect his focus from himself to expressing compassion and sorrow for Nikki Allan. However, Heron insists that he's always prioritized others over himself. Professor David Dixon, an expert in police practices at the University of New South Wales, carefully examined Heron's interviews. In his report titled Integrity, Interrogation, and Criminal Injustice, Dixon suggests that the police may have been influenced by the Reid technique, a controversial interrogation utilized in the United States since the 1950s. One particular step of this technique involved attempting to portray the crime as something that anyone in a similar situation might have done. As Dixon highlighted, when Heron started to implicate himself, he echoed the less severe version of events that the detectives had proposed to him. George didn't have a qualified solicitor to complain about the interrogation tactics used against him. Instead, he had an unqualified solicitor's representative who, at the end of the interviews, expressed satisfaction with how they'd been conducted. However, the judge reviewing the transcripts, Mr. Justice Mitchell, expressed serious concerns. He noted that George had not seen a qualified solicitor until he appeared in court, despite being fluent and articulate throughout the interviews. Mitchell considered the interviews to be an oppressive exercise aimed at breaking George's resolve. The detectives had also exaggerated the strength of the evidence against him, with only one witness, Margaret Hodgson, claiming to have seen George with the victim. Furthermore, Hodgson was not asked to attend an identity parade until after the interviews, where she failed to identify George. Initially, Northumbria police defended their interviews, but they eventually agreed to an inquiry. The resulting report recommended tailored training for officers investigating serious crimes and the adoption of the peace method, which allowed suspects to provide an uninterrupted account of events before confronting them with inconsistencies. Bradley, troubled by how George was treated, anticipated the possibility of an attack when handing him over to prison officers. He later expressed remorse for his feelings at that time, empathizing with what George must have endured. George was safely escorted out of Leeds Crown Court with the help of a decoy police van. He was taken to a hotel by Robin Patton, one of his lawyers, and then to a monastery where he reunited with his mother. The following day, he was driven to Morpeth railway station, and wearing a baseball cap to avoid recognition, he boarded a train to Scotland. A photograph taken before his departure showed Heron looking thin and vulnerable, holding a plastic bag with his belongings. Nigel Green was the crime and investigations reporter on the Sunderland Echo, Sunderland's local newspaper at the time. He met George after he was cleared at Leeds Crown Court.
I met George after he was cleared at Leeds Crown Court. The arrangement was that I was picking him up from a monastery somewhere in the wilds outside Leeds, and I had to pick him up and drive him to, I was supposed to drive him to Scotland. On that particular night, it was a winter's night, and it was snowing heavily, and I thought, well, we are not going to make it to Scotland. So I stopped at a train station in Morpeth and put him on a train to Scotland. He had a mother that I met. They lived in Pennywell. They were from a deprived background. When I met him at this monastery somewhere on the outskirts of Leeds, he'd spent a year on remand in prison. He was thin. He was very gaunt. It's clear that he wasn't the killer. And I hope that he can now get on with his life.
Following George's acquittal, the Allan family found themselves without any sense of closure or justice for the loss of their young daughter. No one was held accountable for the death of their little girl, leaving them with unanswered questions and unresolved grief. After Nikki's death and Heron's acquittal, Sharon faced a lot of criticism. False rumors circulated, claiming that Nikki wasn't well-fed or dressed appropriately. People accused Sharon of being a drinker who used money from collection tins meant for Nikki's funeral to buy alcohol. They labeled her as a carefree woman and questioned why she would let a 7-year-old wander alone on a cold October night. Sharon came from a family with a troubled reputation. Her father, Dickie Prest, and her brother Greg were frequently involved in various problems. In 1961, Dickie Prest, a former docker, married Vina Creighton. They had 5 children: Greg, Joan, Tony, Sharon, and Sandra. However, they got divorced in 1969 when Sharon was just 3 years old. Opinions differ on Dickie's character, with some considering him a rogue or a thug. Sharon recalled him as occasionally friendly, but also somewhat menacing. She remembered being taken to the hospital with wounds and bruises that were from Dickie hitting her. She was then placed in foster care at the age of 3. She spent most of her time between the ages of 3 and 14 in different care homes, but she viewed it as normal for her. During that period, Sharon only saw her dad once when he attended a social work meeting. However, when she turned 14, he started spending time with school friends in Weregarth, where Dickie lived with his second wife, Jenny, and their 3 children, Gail, Nikki, and Allan. Her siblings hadn't been in touch with her, and the only family member she considered close was Greg, who sadly passed away due to alcohol-related issues in 2015. Sharon disliked Vina and resented Dickie, but she held affection for Jenny. Jenny suggested that Sharon move into their flat, and Sharon, who'd never experienced having a mother figure, gladly accepted. Gail, Nikki, and Allan were young at that time, and sharing bedrooms didn't bother Sharon because she was happy to have a family. For a girl who'd been shuffled from place to place, the close-knit community of Weregarth provided a sense of belonging. Having a role model like Jenny encouraged Sharon to earn money by babysitting and delivering newspapers. Soon, she started dating David Allan, one of her neighbors. By the age of 16, she became pregnant with Stacy and later with Nikki. However, Sharon and David broke up not long after Nikki's birth. She then entered a relationship with Anthony Waldron, whose mother, Shirley, worked as a welfare rights officer. Sharon and Anthony had 2 more children, Zara in 1989 and Naomi in 1991. However, Anthony's mother disapproved of Sharon being a single parent, causing arguments that eventually led Sharon to ask Anthony to leave. 6 months before Nikki's tragic death, the family moved into a ground-floor flat in Weregarth. Sharon admitting to facing challenges, but enjoyed being a mother despite never experiencing motherly care herself. Considering her circumstances, she did a commendable job. Sharon took Stacy and Nikki to school, and Zara and Naomi to nursery. She made sure they were well-fed, clean, dressed appropriately, and even tied their hair with ribbons. It was the 2000s now. In the years that followed after George's acquittal, Sharon relied heavily on diazepam and MD 2020, and her daughters ended up in foster care at times. She got married, but later divorced. Sadly, it appeared that the police had given up on finding answers about Nikki. When Sharon tried to inquire if they'd pursued any leads, she was ignored. Eventually, she started reducing her medication, worked on rebuilding her relationships with her daughters, and went through another marriage and divorce. Although she continued to struggle with drinking and at times felt she might drink herself to death. Around early 2003, she began forming friendships with other mothers facing similar challenges. One of these mothers was Ann Ming, who in 1990 tragically discovered her daughter Julie's body under her bathtub months after Cleveland police had searched her apartment. Despite her own struggles, she wasn't ready to let go of what happened to Sharon, and she continued her fight for justice. She took legal action against George in civil court and won the case when George failed to defend himself. The consequence was that George could face trial again if the case was ever reopened by the police with new evidence. Then, in September 2003, Ming successfully overturned the double jeopardy rule after her long campaign. In 2006, Billy Dunlop, who'd been acquitted of Julie's murder but later boasted about it, was charged again and pleaded guilty. This gave Sharon renewed hope. If Dunlop could face trial again, why not George, especially if they could find new DNA evidence? In 2006, understanding how the media operated, Sharon called journalists to Nikki's gravesite and expressed her desire to have the body exhumed for fresh tests. Sharon took it upon herself to do what the detectives in 1992 hadn't done, expand the investigation beyond George. She delved into who else was living in Ware Garth at the time and what their activities were during Nikki's murder. However, her quest for information sometimes resulted in accusations of disturbing the peace, causing damage and harassment. It was late 2015, and 23 years had passed since Nikki's death. Sharon became aware of Terry Clark, the longtime partner of her sister Sandra. Terry played a role similar to Fagan, dealing with stolen goods brought to him by runners. She also discovered the two Carolines, a mother and daughter who lived 3 doors away from Dickie and Jenny. The older Caroline had previously babysat for Sharon. In October 1992, Sharon remembered that she was living with a man who happened to be one of Clark's runners, although she couldn't recall his name. To keep an eye on these women, Sharon decided to move to Ryhope as she didn't want to simply sit and cry at people's doors. But when all the doors were closing on Sharon, a new door opened in the form of a massive twist. Eventually, Sharon found what she'd been searching for. One day, Carolyn sent her a text message containing the name of the man she lived with during Nikki's murder, David Smith, also known as David Bell and David Boyd. Boyd had a long criminal history attached to his name, not just as a runner, but also as a routine offender. In 1986, Boyd faced a conviction for disturbing the peace when he approached 4 children aged between 8 and 10. He grabbed one of them and asked her for a kiss. In 2000, he was convicted of indecent assault for an incident in which he approached 2 girls, aged 12 and 9, at a park. He proceeded to touch the younger girl inappropriately. During a conversation with a probation officer, Boyd admitting having impure thoughts when he saw young girls and feeling excited about touching them. He discussed entering a phase around age 22, during which he would contemplate seeing young girls naked and having intimate encounters with them. It's noteworthy that he had one conviction for an offense involving children prior to Nikki's murder and another one afterward. In early 2016, Lisa Thieker, a detective chief inspector, was approached to review the case.
I'm Detective Chief Superintendent Lisa Thieker, and I'm the Senior Investigating Officer in the Nikki Allan murder. So I was the Senior Investigating Officer in 2016, and in April of that year I went down to the lab to sit with the scientist James Chapman to look around what opportunities we had to do some testing on Nikki Allan's clothes and looking at other exhibits as well, including the brick. So there was new forensic techniques that was coming out around YSTR, so it was a real opportunity for us to revisit the exhibits that we still had to see if we could identify the offender. So that was in the April. James Chapman, the scientist, has worked throughout kind of like that year, and then in February 2017, that is when I first get information that we've got an unidentified profile. So at that point, in the February, I know that I've got a profile, but I don't know who it belongs to.
By that time, Sharon had compiled a lengthy list of potential suspects. Recognizing the potential of YSTR, a DNA analysis method, Thieker collaborated with DNA expert James Chapman to explore the option of retesting Nikki's clothing. In September of the same year, Sharon created an online petition urging a comprehensive review of the cold case. The following year, Sharon had a meeting with the then Chief Constable Steve Ashman after a Y profile was discovered on Nikki's clothes. Ashman made a commitment to conduct a thorough reinvestigation.
Any adults in my side of the family, Nikki's dad's side, people in the area, if Nikki had been like in the area, because the DNA could be on Nikki's coat of a few days ago if she's been in a friend's house and picked a male's DNA up. It's just to eliminate all that so they can get right to the main DNA.
Under the leadership of Thieker, the investigative team identified and tracked down hundreds of men who'd resided in the area during 1992, including David Boyd, based on information provided by Sharon. These individuals were approached and requested to provide DNA samples for comparison. In 2017, a fresh team of forensic experts took over the investigation into Nikki's case. At that time, Sharon also urged people to come to the police and give their DNA samples, especially people from her father's side. They made a significant announcement during a press conference, revealing that they discovered male DNA on Nikki's clothing. David Boyd provided his DNA sample on October 4, 2017. A month later, in November, forensic scientists confirmed a match between his DNA and the one found on the clothing. As a result, Boyd was arrested and questioned on April 17, 2018, and again in April 2019.
David? Yeah. Aye, how are you doing? From the No, no, from the police. Come have a word? Yeah. Cheers. Do us a favour and just knock the telly off for a second? What? Can you do us a favour and just knock the telly off just so you can hear what I'm saying? Thanks, yeah. David, this is Terry, this is Marty. We're part of the team that's reinvestigating the murder of Nikki Allan. Yeah. Okay. Part of that investigation has led us to suspect that you may have had some involvement in that. Okay. So I'm arresting you on suspicion. Okay. Of that offence. You do not have to say anything, but it may harm the offence if you do not mention, when questioned, something which you later lie in court. Anything you do say may be given in evidence. Just leave your phone there for a moment.
Finally, in May 2022, he was formally charged in connection with the case. For Sharon, the quest for answers had spanned decades. Unfortunately, the pace of police investigation was far from satisfactory, leaving her waiting anxiously for resolution.
I'm Detective Chief Superintendent Lisa Thieker, and I'm the Senior Investigating Officer in the Nikki Allan murder. The case presented and the understanding of the case is David Boyd was the last person to actually see Nikki Allan alive. We know we've got a number of sightings of Nikki playing inside the Garths, so we've got reliable sightings that we've been able to time. We know that we've got CCTV of David Boyd walking along Law Street with Nikki Allan skipping behind. He's then lured her and taken her to the old Exchange building, where we know that he's assaulted her outside and he's put her in that building. He's assaulted her numerous times with a brick and he's stabbed her repeatedly before dragging her body down to the basement of the old Exchange building. I've seen footage from back in the day in terms of the activity when the police was called. We know that the police helicopter was up, and then when the police have arrived, the neighbours have been out searching for Nikki. The whole community have come together looking for little Nikki in terms of where she's gone. Everybody was out searching for her throughout the night and until the next morning when she was found in the old Exchange building.
On April 20th, 2023, the trial of David Boyd began with a presentation of evidence in Court 1. Richard Wright, the prosecuting barrister, prepared to show a video depicting the murder scene, cautioning the jurors that its content would be disturbing. Despite the pixelation concealing Nikki's body, the video would reveal bloodstains. Boyd, a man with a dragon tattoo peeking out from his white t-shirt, remained impassive as he observed the footage on his screen.
You lured Nikki Allan away from the relative safety of the Garths by telling her lies. Only you know what you said to her to cause her to leave the Garths with you shortly before 10 p.m. on the 7th of October 1992. But somehow, you tricked her into going with you in the opposite direction to her home and on a cold and dark night.
The camera captured Nikki's final path through the old Exchange building, starting from the boarded-up window at the rear where she'd been pushed, all the way to the basement where her lifeless body was discarded. The footage lingered in a ground-floor room, exposing the peeling paint, broken floorboards, and graffiti. It then zoomed in on a bloodied brick and a stain on the far wall, signifying the farthest point from which Nikki could have tried to escape her assailant, as Wright explained.
A witness saw you both on your way to the old Exchange building, you leading the way and Nikki skipping along after you. The impression of that witness was that you were father and daughter. You didn't need to use force because Nikki knew you and she trusted you. The jury heard evidence that Nikki was shy and clingy to her mother, not a child who would have been inclined to go off with a stranger. But you knew Nikki's family and they knew you.
Just before Wright drew attention to the blood on the staircase edges, Sharon chose to leave the courtroom. It was revealed that each step had served as a jarring impact point for Nikki's head as she fell down. The camera proceeded to trace the drag marks from the base of the staircase, leading through the basement and into the room where Nikki's body had been discovered, lying on her left side. Briefly hovering over the pixelated figure in the corner, it captured the distinct emerald green of her t-shirt before shifting away.
Your purpose in luring Nikki away to the old exchange building was sexual. You intended to sexual assault Nikki either in the grounds of the old exchange building or in the building itself. You were age 25 at the time. Nikki was 7 years old. There could have been no benign reason for your wishing to trick Nikki into going with you to an isolated derelict building. Using common sense, there could be no other reason for you luring her away as you did for anything other than a sexual reason.
After lunch, Wright requested the presence of a mannequin, slightly taller than Nikki at 49.6 inches. The mannequin was dressed exactly like Nikki, wearing red kickers, knee-length white socks, black leggings, a green t-shirt, and a purple coat with a pink floral lining. It was positioned on a table before the jurors. They'd previously been informed that Nikki had entered the old exchange building without her coat and shoes, which were discovered near the red brick boundary wall. Testimonies from a neighbor mentioned hearing two piercing screams emanating from the direction of the building, while a woman leaving the McFish factory described a noise resembling a wailing cat or the howling wind.
You took steps to conceal what you'd done. You did your best to hide Nikki's body by dragging her down into the dark cellar, where you dumped her in the far corner of the room furthest away from the staircase. No one would have been likely to have found her body had they not been looking for it in the cellar with a decent torch. You then covered yourself by giving false information to the police. You provided yourself with a neat but false alibi, claiming to have been away from the Garths, getting fish and chips for a friend at the time when Nikki was killed.
Wright's strategic move helped establish key aspects of the prosecution's case, as navigating the building in complete darkness to move Nikki's body would have required an intimate familiarity with its layout, and that the areas of Nikki's clothing where Boyd's DNA was found were the exact points the killer would have needed to touch in order to bring her into the building. During his testimony, DNA expert James Chapman revealed that the fresh investigation into Nikki's murder in 2016 had yielded an almost complete Y-profile match to Boyd. The matching DNA was discovered near the top of Nikki's t-shirt and around the right hip area near the waistband of her leggings, with a partial match found at the right armpit of the t-shirt. Wright highlighted that the hip and armpit were the most probable areas of Nikki's body that the murderer would have had come into contact with while lifting her. Boyd had no male relatives residing in Sunderland, making the odds of his Y-profile matching an unrelated individual 1 in 28,000. The police had collected DNA samples from hundreds of men connected to the East End in 1992, but no other matches were found. Wright urged the jury to consider the DNA evidence within its proper context.
You are now 55 years old. When you committed this murder, you were 23 years old. You appeared before the court on 22 occasions for 45 offences. The majority of your offending has been acquisitive, but your sexual attraction to 7-year-old Nikki Allan was not an isolated incident.
Wright asserted that Boyd also bore a striking resemblance to an artist's impression created with the assistance of Margaret Hodgson, who'd witnessed a man accompanied by a skipping girl on Low Street shortly before 10 p.m. The police had come across a photograph of Boyd taken in the early 1990s, showing him casually seated in an armchair with his left leg slung over his right. Wright presented the two images side by side, revealing a noticeable similarity.
The last individual. Oh, yeah, you'll have your time, Charlie. You get your time. This is the worst injustice. Oh, yeah.
I wish you can prepare for the speech. Can you believe it? Yeah, something for you. I wish so.
And so, after the trial, things were clear that the nonchalant David Boyd, still sitting comfortably in the courtroom, was to be pronounced guilty of the murder of the 7-year-old Nikki Allan. And thus, after 30 years of longing, Sharon got her closure. The Waregarth community saw a murderer go to jail, the police found their culprit, and George Heron got a clean chit from the locals. David Boyd's trial ended on May 12, 2023, when the jury took just 90 minutes to decide he was guilty of murdering Nikki. After the trial, the first thing the police did was to offer an apology letter to George Heron. But Sharon was still unhappy with how the trial went. After all, Boyd would be allowed parole after 29 years.
Nikki, the way she was murdered, and I've had to listen to it, it's horrendous. I cannot think in my brain how bad it is. And I thought life would have meant life without parole. I've been let down again by the justice system and the police force. The police force that's on Nikki's case now, because somebody forgot to tell us that they were going to apologise, and then somebody forgot to tell us that they were going to use the old justice system. Same old thing all the time. Same old thing.
Sharon did not accept this. She wanted life imprisonment for Boyd without the possibility of parole. But as per the law at that time, in 1992, this sentence wasn't permissible. Nowadays, Sharon resides in Roker, a lovely area of Sunderland. Her home features a small garden with a little patch of soil. Within that patch, stone angels stand watch, creating a dedicated space in honor of Nikki. Whenever she shares a post on Facebook about Nikki's trial, it garners hundreds of likes and messages. Whenever she ventures into the city center, passers-by eagerly approach her, seeking to extend a handshake and show their support. Sharon has a plastic box filled with photographs, souvenirs, and documents. Inside were sympathy cards, replies to her letters seeking support, newspaper clippings, and even court summons and fines she'd incurred during her personal investigations. One letter on Buckingham Palace notepaper conveyed the Queen's sympathy for the tragic death of Sharon's daughter, Nikki, in 1992, but clarified that personal involvement was beyond Her Majesty's reach. Similarly, a response from the office of the Deputy Prime Minister explained that due to parliamentary rules, an MP could not intervene on behalf of another MP's constituent, thus rendering assistance impossible. Among Sharon's possessions are some of Nikki's schoolwork. One noteworthy item is Nikki's newsbook, where she'd sketched a picture of herself happily skipping rope beside a slide. Underneath, she'd written, in slightly uneven handwriting, "My favorite sport is skipping because I enjoy jumping." In her religious education, RE book, Nikki had written a prayer that resonated with her life by the docks. "We thank you for the fishermen who brave the waters to catch fish. We are grateful for the fish shops and the nourishment you provide us each day. Amen." Above the prayer, Nikki's drawn the flowing blue streak of the river, accompanied by images of a cod, a haddock, and a plaice. The date of the prayer was Thursday, September 24th, less than 2 weeks before her tragic passing. So this was the story of Nikki Allan and her mother Sharon, who would continue to fight for justice for her child long after others had given up. Do you think that the sentence of David Boyd was justified? Or do you think that Sharon's efforts will again bring a change in the law?
Has she ever done anything?
Nothing. Never. She's never left Tannery property. She knows where she's can and cannot be here. She was, in the courtyard where she was supposed to be. She came over here, and that was the last we saw of her on...
On July 26, 2015, at 6:08 p.m., a distressing 911 call was received from a resident of a Santa Cruz apartment complex in California. The caller's name was Laura Jordan. Her words were simple, yet filled with dread. Her 8-year-old daughter, Madyson Middleton, was missing.
Good afternoon. We're glad you've joined us. We'll begin with the latest on the search for a missing 8-year-old Santa Cruz girl.
At a news conference earlier this morning, Santa Cruz police say they've expanded their 4.5 square mile search area for the missing 8-year-old girl and have called in the FBI, who have additional resources to help. Search crews in orange jackets are fanning out through a large area of Santa Cruz, hoping to find any sign of Madyson Middleton.
The young girl had last been seen around the complex just after 5 p.m. So what would really happen to that little girl? Let's find out. Santa Cruz is a coastal city in California that exudes a laid-back vibe and natural beauty. It's located between the Santa Cruz Mountains and the Pacific Ocean. The city's population is around 62,000, fostering a tight-knit community that values sustainability and creativity. The city also boasts redwood-filled parks, ideal for hiking and picnics. Art galleries, boutiques, and diverse cuisine add charm to its lively downtown. Whether you're a surfer, nature enthusiast, or culture lover, Santa Cruz promises an unforgettable California experience. And here, our story begins. Madyson Jordan Middleton, fondly known as Maddie, came into this world on October 5, 2006 in Santa Cruz County, California, USA. Her parents, Laura Jordan and Mike Middleton, raised her in the Tannery Arts Center apartment complex. Maddie's childhood was filled with joy. She found happiness in swimming, dancing, her passion for wolves, talking, and art. Her sense of humor was truly remarkable. We called her Chatty Maddie, said Dan Middleton, Maddie's paternal grandfather. Maddie's friendly nature allowed her to make friends with everyone in the complex. Life was sailing smoothly, full of happiness, until an unforeseen tragedy struck. On Sunday, July 26, 2015, her mother Laura was playing a board game with a friend that came over. Maddie was waiting for them to finish, but then decided to put to good use a recently received gift, a white scooter. Dressed in a purple dress and sporting a black bicycle helmet, she rode the scooter around the courtyard. Throughout the afternoon, until the sun began to set at 4 o'clock, several neighbors caught glimpses of Maddie in the courtyard. Even after that, she was spotted a few more times riding around. Occasionally, she paused to chat with some of the other children, but she was also content being on her own. She had a lot of freedom to play where she felt comfortable, Laura said of her daughter. At around 5:07 p.m., the last known sighting of Maddie occurred near the mailboxes outside the ground floor parking garage. This was captured on video surveillance. Tragically, this became the final time anyone laid eyes on her. After this moment, Maddie inexplicably vanished. As the evening set in, Laura, Maddie's mother, started a desperate door-to-door search within the complex, but no one had any information about Maddie's whereabouts. Laura's concern grew even more as she couldn't find any trace of her daughter. She knew that Maddie was a confident child, but not one to wander off alone or engage with strangers. Feeling the urgency of the situation, Laura decided to involve the police, and at 6:08 p.m., she promptly made a 911 call to report Maddie missing. As the distress call reached the Santa Cruz Police Department, officers immediately responded to the situation. They flooded the Tannery Arts Center apartment complex and commenced their search for Maddie. They also circulated photos of the missing girl. The community soon rallied together with hundreds of volunteers, including friends, family, and even homeless Santa Cruzans, all joining forces to comb through the surrounding neighborhood.
This wonderful kid, we would have heard her. I don't get this. Nobody gets this. We would have heard. She was just right here.
All feeling a little helpless at this point. We've been checked all of the tents and homeless camps. A lot of us have been up all night. We've gone as far as Paradise Park.
From the river to the beach and the mountains that bordered the city, everyone was determined to find Maddie. Realizing the urgency, the Sheriff's Office search and rescue team was called in that same evening to lend their expertise. Additionally, a specially trained search and rescue K-9 unit from the State Office of Emergency Services joined the effort. Throughout the late hours of Sunday, the Santa Cruz Police Department, along with allied agencies, remained on alert. Detectives followed up on every lead, leaving no stone unturned. Despite their exhaustive search, no significant breakthroughs were made. Given the seriousness of the situation, the Santa Cruz Police Department also reached out to the FBI for additional assistance. In a matter of hours, the FBI responded by deploying a team of agents and resources to support the search for Maddie. The combined efforts of local law enforcement and federal agents intensified, all with the hope of finding Maddie and reuniting her with her family. On Monday, July 27, 2015, the Santa Cruz Police Department, FBI personnel, and search and rescue teams from Santa Cruz County and nearby counties continued their search efforts. Approximately 50 FBI agents conducted a thorough door-to-door search within the Tannery complex, while Santa Cruz detectives meticulously checked trash cans and requested residents to open their vehicles in the Tannery parking garages. By 11 a.m. that morning, the Santa Cruz police officially classified Maddie's disappearance as a missing person case.
We're not calling this a kidnapping. We're still early on in our investigation. What we're calling it this is we're looking for a lost child.
Approaching the 24-hour mark since she went missing, the police decided to shift their focus back to the apartment complex itself, and so a more comprehensive and intensive search of the buildings commenced. At 7:55 p.m. on July 27th, their search came to an end when Maddie's lifeless body was discovered in a bag inside a recycling bin located in the first-floor garage of the apartment complex. The body had been concealed in a way that had made it harder to spot. The officers were deeply saddened by this heartbreaking discovery.
Police in Santa Cruz, California have a 15-year-old boy under arrest in connection with the disappearance and apparent death of an 8-year-old girl.
However, the officers didn't disclose the specific reasons for the boy's arrest or reveal his identity at that moment. The situation was clearly uncertain, leaving the community seeking answers and hoping for clarity after the devastating turn of events. The only clue available was footage of the arrested boy's mother expressing distress as he was taken into custody for questioning. Many details, such as the cause of Maddie's death and the reasons behind it, remained unknown. During a press conference at 11 a.m. on July 28th, Police Chief Kevin Vogel provided further details to reporters.
Approximately 7:55 p.m., a Santa Cruz police detective conducted a secondary and more thorough canvass of the complex, which included the search of a recycle bin located in an enclosure on the first-floor parking structure at the Tannery Arts Center complex. Maddie's body was located within that recycle bin. I will merely say that Maddie's body was concealed in a recycle bin in a way that was not obvious or readily apparent. There was a 15-year-old male juvenile who resides in an apartment on the property upstairs from the location where Maddie's body was found, and he was nearby when Maddie was located. He was subsequently taken into custody, where he was brought back to the Santa Cruz Police Department and interviewed. Investigators from the Santa Cruz Police Department interviewed this individual into the early morning hours this morning, and he was subsequently arrested for the murder of Madyson Middleton. Additionally, investigators have located evidence that links the suspect to this horrific crime. It appears that she was lured to the suspect's apartment willingly. Additionally, we've determined that Maddie was murdered inside of the suspect's apartment.
On that very evening following the press conference, a candlelight vigil drew together several hundred individuals who gathered to honor the memory of Maddie. Maddie's mother also requested a special Howl for Maddie event, where participants were encouraged to howl at the moon. This was a tribute to Maddie's fondness for wolves. The event resonated deeply, with people sharing their moments of remembrance through pictures and videos on social media. Following the tragic homicide, leaders of Santa Cruz City schools took proactive measures and offered advice to parents on how to guide their children through the difficult aftermath. They encouraged parents to help their children comprehend the circumstances surrounding Maddie's death and intervene if there were any misconceptions or false perceptions about the cause of the event. The main objective was to ensure that the children did not blame themselves or others for the heartbreaking situation. For as long as it could, age protected the identity of the teenager responsible for Maddie's death. But this all changed when Santa Cruz County District Attorney Jeff Roselle issued a statement. He stated that they had enough evidence against him and would charge the teenager as an adult, not only for first-degree murder, but also for kidnapping and other offenses.
The law allows, under certain circumstances, with certain types of offenses, a determination as to whether or not you want to charge someone as an adult or whether or not they're charged as a juvenile. Based on the information that we know at this point, there do appear to be charges that can be filed as an adult, and we are absolutely considering that. And these are the type of charges and the type of offenses that are and can be charged as.
And with that, his name was released. The teenager responsible was revealed to be Adrian Jerry A.J. Gonzalez. He resided with his mother, Reggie DeMalig Factor, in the Tannery Arts Center, and this made him Maddie's neighbor. He was the only child of Reggie Factor and Abraham Lomai Gonzalez. Adrian's childhood wasn't the easiest. He was born in October 1999 at Sutter Maternity and Surgery Center in Santa Cruz as Adrian Jerry Gonzalez, according to his birth certificate obtained by the Sentinel. People close to the family described Adrian's upbringing as being shattered by divorce and frequent lack of money, employment, and housing. When Adrian was not yet 2 years old, Abraham Gonzalez was arrested on suspicion of felony assault with a deadly weapon and misdemeanor battery in a relationship. He was convicted only of the latter charge and sentenced to 3 years on probation, according to court records. Laura struggled to find work for quite some time, leaving her and Adrian relying on food stamps. Eventually, she managed to get a job at a healthcare center in Live Oak, where she worked for many years, as shared by Linda Jovich. Around 2008, Laura found employment at a Dollar Tree store on East Cliff Drive near 14th Avenue in Live Oak. The store offered discounted food, toys, party supplies, and other items, and she worked as a cashier, stocked shelves, handled deliveries, and even performed restroom cleaning duties. However, her work environment turned unpleasant when her boss made unwelcome, inappropriate advances, forcibly touched her, and coerced her into engaging in unwanted activity with promises of preferential treatment. Subsequently, Jovich filed a harassment lawsuit on behalf of Laura, which was later settled out of court in May 2013 for an undisclosed sum. Following her departure from the Dollar Tree job, Laura faced financial difficulties leading to homelessness. She and Adrian sought temporary accommodation with friends and eventually found residence at the Homeless Services Center on Coral Street in Santa Cruz. Seeking more stable living conditions, they later moved to the Tannery Arts Center, where he grew up with the other kids, including Maddie. In a courtroom on April 27, 2021, Laura told Adrian of the pain he caused, reminding him how he and Maddie grew up together as children of the tannery and attended a birthday party in the same apartment where he would later kill Maddie. It was a shock to the community upon learning that Adrian could be capable of such an act, particularly in regard to a little girl like Maddie. In the beginning, some neighbors speculated that the incident might have been an unfortunate accident, possibly stemming from a childish game gone horribly wrong. They believed that Adrian, frightened by the situation, attempted to conceal the scene. Such beliefs were not unfounded, as to most people, Adrian appeared to be a typical teenager. In the area, Adrian was known for his impressive skills with a yo-yo, and he had even worked as a counselor at the tannery. He was also a freshman at Santa Cruz High School.
He's just like a normal kid. Like, he hangs out on the levee with other normal kids and plays with his yo-yo all day long. Like, I haven't, he doesn't really strike any chords as being a baby killer.
His actions seemed far removed from anything that could connect him to such a terrible crime. One neighbor shared their fondness for Adrian, stating that they loved him and considered him an outstanding kid, even describing him as their poster child. The collective disbelief within the community further highlighted the stark contrast between the image they held of Adrian and the disturbing reality of his involvement in Maddie's tragic death. However, social media posts indicated that Adrian was a deeply troubled young man who might have been grappling with depression. An examination of his now disabled Instagram account revealed signs of his inner turmoil. In the weeks preceding Maddie's death, Adrian posted a series of cryptic messages on his account, hinting at the struggles he was facing. According to reports, he expressed feelings of anxiety and insecurity. In one post, he wrote, "Wears all black to try and look powerful and hide the crippling anxiety." The last post made on Adrian's Instagram page was on Monday, July 27, 2015. This was the day Maddie's body was discovered. The post featured a video of what appeared to be his fingers playing the song Mad World by Tears for Fears on a keyboard. The accompanying caption contained lyrics from the song's refrain, "The dreams in which I'm dying are the best I ever had." Interestingly, the song was well known for its inclusion in the 2001 cult classic film Donnie Darko, which tells the story of a troubled teenager haunted by visions of a giant rabbit that influences him to commit crimes. What makes the timing of this Instagram post particularly chilling is that it occurred while hundreds of volunteers were outside his apartment, desperately searching for any sign of Maddie. The post and the others found on the page raised concerns about Adrian's state of mind and added to the gravity of the situation. Katie Carroll, a friend of Adrian from middle school, provided some valuable insights about him. She described him as kind of an introvert who was struggling with deep depression when they were friends 2 years before the incident occurred. Katie recalled a distressing incident from back when Adrian had called her late at night and threatened to jump off the roof of his building. In response, Katie and her mother attempted to get him the help he needed by urging him to seek therapy. However, the friendship between Katie and Adrian eventually broke off due to his constant talk of taking his own life. Katie revealed that despite this, she never witnessed any self-harming behavior from him. After the friendship ended, Adrian became preoccupied with Katie and another friend who had also distanced herself from him. Despite his fixation, Katie clarified that she never felt directly threatened by him. Following the news of what had happened to Adrian, Katie revealed that she revisited her old Facebook messages with him and came across some unsettling messages. One message said, "I'll be gone eventually," while another contained the cryptic statement, "Something big will happen in high school." Following Adrian's arrest, more details about what really happened on the day he took Maddie's life came to light. During his interview with the police, the teenager confessed to luring Maddie to his apartment by offering her ice cream. He proceeded to tie her up and subjected her to a vicious assault. Following this, he disposed of her body in the bin located in the parking garage downstairs. Further revelations shed light on Adrian's behavior during the subsequent search for Maddie. Astonishingly, Adrian was among the many volunteers who actively participated in the search efforts. A neighbor disclosed to the media that Adrian persistently pestered him with questions about the progress of the search for Maddie's body. Additionally, he repeatedly approached the police, inquiring about the advancement of the case while they were still in the process of locating her. Even more shocking was Adrian's motive behind the crime. He revealed that he'd been contemplating taking his own life and decided to carry out the terrible act to observe how people would react to his actions by taking the life of an innocent girl. His obsession about the case subsequently led to his arrest. Apparently, on the day Maddie's body was found, Adrian was watching them intently as they were searching the bins, and the second the officers realized that Maddie was in there, he started to run, despite the fact that he wouldn't have been able to even see what they'd found. On July 30th, 2015, Adrian made his initial appearance in court. He faced charges of kidnapping, murder, and assault. Dressed in a green t-shirt and khaki pants at Juvenile Hall, he presented a solemn demeanor and softly said yes when asked if he'd waive his right to a speedy trial. However, he refrained from entering a plea on that day. To represent him in the legal proceedings, Adrian was appointed public defenders Larry Bigham and Leela Sayer. In the following months, Adrian's legal process gained momentum. County prosecutors successfully filed for his transfer to adult court. In August 2017, a hearing commenced to determine whether Adrian would be tried in juvenile or adult court. October 24, 2017, which was the final day of the transfer hearing, marked the moment when Adrian's fate was determined. Santa Cruz County Superior Court Judge John Salazar, presiding over the hearing, summarized the testimony of various doctors and psychiatric professionals who had been called throughout the case. Their testimonies ranged from Adrian suffering from depression to being characterized as a sociopath lacking empathy. Ultimately, Judge Salazar delivered his judgment, describing the acts committed as cruel, callous, and calculated. Based on his assessment, he deemed Adrian unfit for the juvenile courts, which were designed to rehabilitate young offenders before they reached the age of 23. Salazar cited 3 legal elements to support his decision. Adrian's level of sophistication, which multiple teachers attested to, stating that he was intelligent and observant, the insufficient time available for rehabilitation within the juvenile system, and the gravity and circumstances of the crime, which warranted trial in adult courts. As Judge Salazar issued the order, emotions ran high among Maddie's relatives and supporters who cried out in relief. The overwhelming feeling of joy was evident as they embraced the outcome of the hearing.
In a prepared statement, the judge read the evidence, the mental experts, and police testimony, and in the end, the judge ruled Adrian Gonzalez will be tried in adult court. He was immediately moved to the main jail while he awaits trial. Santa Cruz County Superior Court Judge John Salazar said AJ's lack of remorse and calm demeanor immediately after the killing of 8-year-old Maddie Middleton was the most heinous he has ever seen in more than 27 years on the bench. Maddie's mother and grandfather sat through 9 weeks of disturbing testimony and were satisfied with the judge's ruling.
It was agonizing to listen to the testimony, to see the medical examiner crying on the stand. I mean, these were very stressful.
I feel very bad for the jury that's going to have to look at all those awful photographs of what he did to my daughter. We were spared the photographs this time. We heard the details. The jury's going to have to see it all, and you can't unsee things.
After the judge's ruling, Larry Bigham expressed his disappointment to the media and revealed their plan to appeal the decision. With Adrian's case now proceeding as an adult trial, the implications were significant. If found guilty, he'd face life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Immediately following the ruling, Adrian was transferred from Juvenile Hall to Santa Cruz County Jail. His bail was set at $5 million. In May 2018, during the adult proceedings linked to Maddie's murder, Adrian entered a plea of not guilty. During that same year, another distressing incident occurred involving Maddie. Her father, Mike, kept her ashes in a ceramic urn inside his car. Unfortunately, a car thief broke in and stole the urn. To this day, Maddie's ashes have not been returned. In 2019, the state Senate passed SB 1391, a law preventing children 15 or younger from being transferred to adult court. However, Santa Cruz Judge John Salazar later ruled the law unconstitutional. Adrian's defense attorneys appealed this decision to the state Supreme Court, hoping that if the court found SB 1391 constitutional, Adrian could be sent back to the juvenile system. Maddie's mother, Laura, criticized the law, considering it ridiculous. After subsequent legal challenges, the state Supreme Court finally upheld SB 1391's constitutionality in a ruling issued in February 2013. Subsequently, Judge Salazar had no choice but to remove the case from the adult court system. This ruling marked a significant development in Adrian's legal proceedings and its potential impact on his sentencing. In April 2021, Adrian's case was transferred to the juvenile court system, and he immediately pleaded guilty to all the charges against him. On April 27, 2021, during his sentencing, Maddie's father, Mike Middleton, spoke, expressing the tremendous loss he felt. He acknowledged accepting the loss, but emphasized that it did not make the pain any easier. It only allowed him to find some semblance of peace. Maddie's mother, Laura, took the opportunity to play a near 4-minute video recorded by Maddie herself, giving a tour of the Tannery Arts Center where they lived. While the video played, Adrian averted his eyes from the screen. Following this, Adrian also spoke. He expressed that he had no intention of exacerbating the pain with his words. He said he recognized the suffering he'd caused and expressed his commitment to working on his issues to prevent anyone else from experiencing such tragedy. Adrian hoped that through time and his apology, Maddie's family might find it in their hearts to forgive him for what he'd done. After all these, Adrian received a sentence, which involved being sent to a state division of juvenile justice facility. There, he may be eligible for release in as early as 3.5 years. However, his maximum term of confinement extends until he turns 25. In addition to the time served, Adrian is required to register as an offender for life and pay $22,000 in restitution fees. In response to the sentencing, Mike, Maddie's father, conveyed his disappointment, stating that Adrian did not show enough remorse during the hearing. It didn't sound sincere. It sounded staged, coached, and I can imagine why, he said. I hope that he never has the opportunity to do anything like this again. That's what needs to happen. Lisa Jordan, Maddie's grandmother, called the sentencing a joke, expressing her frustration. He'll be in jail for a while, and then they'll let him go. He gets to walk. And when he does it again, maybe then they'll take it seriously, Lisa said. From what we know at the moment, when Adrian turns 25, there'll be no guarantee that he'll be released from the juvenile justice system. The court can be petitioned to extend his time in custody, which might offer some relief for Maddie's family. However, the hurt he caused will undoubtedly remain in their hearts forever. As we come to the end of Maddie's case, we can't help but feel the profound sadness and loss experienced by her family and the community. As we reflect on Adrian's actions, one question lingers in our minds. Did the authorities make the right decision in handling Adrian's case, considering the gravity of his actions?
Communications.
I'm a plumber and I'm on site for a job, and we're snaking a drain, and we've been pulling back. We probably pulled back about 10 pounds, 15 pounds of it looks like flesh type of stuff, meat, and we don't know what it is.
This 911 call transports us back to December 29, 2017, at a residence on Macmillan Drive in Oshawa, Ontario, Canada. The caller, Sean Farndon, a plumber by profession, was met with a disturbing discovery of human flesh clogging the drains. The subsequent investigation led the police to the downstairs neighbor, a 45-year-old man named Adam Strong. To everyone's astonishment, Strong promptly confessed to having human remains in his freezer. However, this was neither the beginning nor the end of this strange and twisted tale. This macabre account has a deeper and more complex backstory that demanded further exploration. To whom did the remains belong? And how did they come to be in the bathroom's drains? Located in the province of Ontario, Canada, Oshawa holds the distinction of being the 6th largest city in the province. Positioned approximately 60 kilometers east of Toronto, it enjoys a picturesque setting along the shoreline of Lake Ontario, and its population exceeds 170,000. While Oshawa was once renowned as the sole automotive capital of Canada, it's since transformed into an education and health sciences hub, though General Motors continues to play a significant role in the city's economy. The city also offers a plethora of educational and employment opportunities. Due to its relatively low crime rate, it's esteemed as a safe and family-friendly area, making it an appealing choice for commuters. Despite this enchanting backdrop, in 2017, Oshawa experienced a harrowing crime that shook the nation to its core. On September 11, 2017, a disturbing discovery was made in Lake Ontario near the Oshawa Harbour. An 11-year-old boy fishing with his grandfather noticed a floating torso in the water. Authorities immediately responded to the scene, recovering the torso and initiating a thorough investigation.
On the 11th of September 2017, we received a call from some fishermen that were down on the pier.
They saw something in the water, and they thought at first it was a turkey carcass, and they began to cast their spoons. But once it landed on the cement pier, it became pretty apparent that it was the torso of a female.
Despite extensive searches conducted by marine units, no other body parts were found. A post-mortem examination was carried out, revealing that the torso belonged to a female, but the cause of death remained inconclusive. Nevertheless, evident signs of trauma led the coroner to determine it was a homicide. The absence of a head posed a significant challenge in identifying the body, so DNA testing was the only viable option. It wasn't until November 9, 2017, 2 months after the disturbing discovery, that the heartbreaking truth was revealed. The torso belonged to Rori Hache, an 18-year-old pregnant Oshawa woman who'd gone missing in late August of the same year. Born on July 9, 1999, Rori Chantal Hache was the apple of the eye of her mother, Shannon Dion. While not much is known about her father, some of her relatives had a reputation for leading a daring lifestyle. Her grandfather, Bernard Gwindon, a former outlaw biker, gangster, and boxer, gained notoriety as the founder and national president of the Satan's Choice Motorcycle Club. Rory's uncle, Harley Gwindon, was also an active member of the Hells Angels, another outlaw motorcycle club. Despite these familial associations, Rory's childhood was relatively uneventful, and she was described as a kind and bright young girl. In addition to her mother, Rori shared a deep bond with her godmother and Shannon's closest friend, Chrissia Mildik. Just like Shannon, Chrissia too had only good things to say about Rori. During her early years, Rori excelled in school, even earning the prestigious title of Army Cadet of the Year in her local squad at the age of 13. However, Rori's life changed for the worse during the first year of high school when someone introduced crystal meth to her, which triggered addiction struggles. In the subsequent years, Rori's life became tumultuous, with drugs becoming a significant part of her existence. Desperate to cope with her addiction, she turned to prostitution, causing great distress to her mother, Shannon. Shannon, in turn, sought external assistance from the Children's Aid Society to help her daughter overcome these challenges. Thankfully, her efforts paid off in the beginning of 2017 when Rori finally began to make strides towards improving her life. She secured a job, returned to school, and found stability by moving in with her boyfriend, Tony. Despite her past struggles, Rori was determined to turn her life around and find a better path for herself. In August 2017, Rori told her mother that she was pregnant. She really wanted to keep the baby, so Shannon supported her. But what Shannon didn't know was that Rori had relapsed into drug use. On August 28, 2019, near the Midtown Mall in Oshawa, Rori had an encounter with Constable Christopher Kane. Over the years, Constable Kane had conducted wellness checks on Rori and made earnest efforts to connect her with social services to aid in her struggles. During their conversation, Rori revealed that she'd been using drugs again, including cocaine and crystal meth, and had gone on dates to pay for these drugs. Deeply concerned for Rori's well-being, Constable Kane resolved to find suitable social services to assist her. Unfortunately, the teenager had vanished by the time he returned. On August 29, 2017, the day after her encounter with Constable Christopher Kane, Rori was brought into an Oshawa hospital by a friend and her mother after suffering a mental relapse. Unfortunately, they were unable to remain with her for an undisclosed reason, and after only a few minutes, they departed, leaving Rori alone at the hospital. Strangely, just 15 minutes later, Rori made a decision to leave the hospital premises before receiving the necessary medical assistance.
She was described as having some sort of a mental episode. The mother made a decision to take her up to the hospital to have her checked. The mother and daughter that brought her there left, leaving Rori in the care of the hospital. For whatever reason, she ended up leaving before she was actually seen by a physician. We see her exiting the hospital on her own. That was the last known sighting we had of her.
Surveillance footage captured her calmly walking out of the hospital, marking the last confirmed sighting of her. From that point on, her whereabouts were unknown. When Rori's family and friends didn't hear from her for a few days, their concerns grew.
I went over to her apartment. Nothing had changed. She hadn't been there. Nobody had heard from her. I realized something's wrong. Terribly, terribly wrong. And I had a really bad feeling.
Fearing the worst, they filed a missing persons report with the Durham police, sparking a citywide search. They also distributed missing flyers throughout the area with her photograph on display.
I made thousands of missing persons posters. There wasn't a place that you could go downtown Oshawa that you didn't see my goddaughter's face. I made sure that every post had her picture.
Sadly, every effort to locate Rori Hache remained futile until DNA evidence finally linked the recovered torso to her, confirming the devastating truth that she had become the victim of a violent crime.
You don't know how your sweet goddaughter ended up dismembered and the rest of her is missing and thrown in a lake like she's a piece of garbage in our little town.
But the case was far from over. The police still faced the daunting task of locating the remaining parts of her body and piecing together the puzzle surrounding her tragic demise. A breakthrough was on the horizon, but remarkably, it came about in a manner that defied all expectations. Just 2 months after the torso was found, a couple living in the upstairs apartment at 19 McMillan Drive had persistent plumbing issues plaguing their home. The situation escalated to the point where the couple had no choice but to call in plumbers on December 29, 2017.
He didn't want any plumbers called. He tried snaking the drain himself. He was taking efforts to fix it.
Since no blockage was found in the upstairs toilet, the plumbers requested entry to the apartment of the downstairs neighbor, 45-year-old Adam Strong. As they began their work in the basement toilet, a foul smell filled the air. This was unlike anything they'd encountered in their regular line of work. It was utterly appalling. The situation became even more unsettling when Adam's behavior took a nervous turn. He paced the floor, closely scrutinizing their every move and asking them numerous questions. Although the plumbers were annoyed by his behavior, they chose to brush it off. Adam justified it by saying that he was simply curious as he'd attempted to fix the problem before but failed. They probably would have ignored him altogether, but what they found inside the pipe changed everything. To their horror, they extracted a disturbing 18-inch long, pink, flesh-like, stringy substance with hair attached to it. Alarmed by the shocking find, they wasted no time and immediately contacted the police to report what they'd encountered.
Communications. I'm a plumber and I'm on site for a job, and we got we're snaking a drain, and we've been pulling back. We probably pulled back about 10 pounds, 15 pounds of it looks like flesh type of stuff, meat, and we don't know what it is.
Within minutes, the officers from the Durham Regional Police arrived at the rental property. They determined that the fleshy substance was indeed human flesh. After gathering crucial information from the plumbers and the concerned couple, the officers proceeded to speak to Adam Strong. As they spoke to him, they braced themselves for the unexpected. However, nothing could have prepared them for what Adam had to say.
They recall him putting his head down and making a comment almost instantaneously that the jig's up. It's a body. If you want the rest of her, she's in my freezer, and she's pretty defleshed.
Adam was immediately taken into custody while police began to search his apartment. It was nothing short of a house of horrors. Every inch was filled with filth, and an overwhelming smell of decay infused the air. In the bathroom, they found that Adam had removed the toilet while trying to address the blockage issue. However, it was in the bedroom where the most gruesome discovery awaited them. Inside a freezer, they came across the remains of a young woman, her head concealed within a plastic bag. The body was in a state of decomposition, just as Adam had described. On the neck of the remains was a tattoo with the phrase, "I live," the exact same one that Rori Hache had.
Rori had a distinct tattoo. She had the word "alive" tattooed on her neck. And when they looked through the freezer, they found a human head. And there was a tattoo clearly displayed. I knew right then, yeah, it's Rori.
Further DNA testing confirmed beyond any shadow of a doubt that the remains found in Adam Strong's apartment were that of Rori. There was no shortage of evidence of Rori's presence in the apartment. Her blood was on Adam's bedroom wall and ceiling, and bodily fluids belonging to him were found on her remains. Her running shoes were found wrapped in plastic and stained in blood. The police discovered that Adam had arranged a proper table with equipment as a makeshift autopsy station. Shivers went down their spines as they realized that was the place where Adam had dismembered his victim. During their search, police also found multiple explicit toys, restraining devices, knives, and an explosive device, which turned out to be a pipe bomb. Thankfully, it was disarmed before it could cause any danger. No one could figure out why it might be in Adam's possession.
Tonight allowed a bang in the heart of an Oshawa neighborhood, the controlled explosion of a suspicious package at the scene of a suspicious death investigation for Durham Regional Police.
Unfortunately, due to a lack of direct evidence that Adam had murdered Rori, police were unable to charge him with murder. Instead, they charged him with indignity to a body.
Know at that point what the cause of death was. To lay that charge, you need the grounds. The decision was made to continue our investigation to see where it took us down the road.
It was time for the investigation to have a closer look at this 45-year-old man's life. Not much was known about Adam Strong, but he moved into the McMillan rental apartment in early 2007. Over the years, Adam had worked as a film set security guard in Oshawa and a gas station employee at 2 different locations in Ajax. Those acquainted with Adam Strong labeled him as a weirdo with a cocky attitude who thought of himself as smarter than he was. He had a tendency for talking nonstop, never knowing how to shut up. One of his ex-girlfriends, whose name has been kept private, described him as abusive and controlling. Much like others, Adam's landlord, Eugenie Papadakis, also had unsettling experiences with him. In fact, in March 2017, following a house fire, she and her granddaughter went to inspect Strong's unit at the McMillan Drive home. They found the unit cluttered with what appeared to be garbage, old food, and other random items. Needless to say, the sight sickened them to the core.
I've never seen them taking any garbage out. Everything is here.
Knives by the bed.
Oh my God.
Detectives also learned that Adam showed a keen interest in BDSM practices. He went as far as posting a picture of handcuffs in his room, captioning it with the chilling phrase, "Home is where my handcuffs hang." Additionally, Adam was deeply engrossed in reviewing adult videos and books, which clearly indicated his fixation on explicit content. These revelations provided valuable insight into his psyche, shedding light on the dark and disturbing world that existed within his apartment. However, it wasn't enough to bring him down for murder, so detectives set their eyes on a confession. During the early morning hours of December 30th, 2017, Durham homicide detectives Darren Short and Hermano Dorrego sat down with Adam Strong for an interrogation. By this time, Adam had already contacted his lawyer. Detectives knew this was their only chance. His bail hearing was scheduled the next day, and after that, they wouldn't be able to interview him without a court order. The pressure was on to obtain crucial information from Strong before the opportunity slipped away.
You said to the officers, if you're looking for the rest of her, you'll find her in the freezer. My question to you is the person in that freezer, Rori?
I decline to answer that question.
Okay. You're saying you decline to answer, but you're shaking your head this way. Does that mean anything?
No.
Okay. Any interest from you at all in telling us your side of things?
No.
Nothing?
When the detectives started the interrogation, they didn't know what to expect. At the very least, they expected that Adam would be nervous now that he was finally caught. However, he was calm, composed, and most of all, indifferent to the situation. However, the biggest challenge was extracting information related to Rori Hache. His stubbornness was perplexing, especially considering Adam's earlier confession about having human remains in his freezer.
I was told these things go on for like hours. Is that true? Again, it's true.
The detectives, well aware that time was running out, resorted to a different approach. They aimed at tapping into Adam's emotions, hoping to reach a part of him that might feel remorse or empathy for the victim and her loved ones.
We've been dealing with that family since September. Very traumatic, very emotional, having a tough time dealing with it. We're trying to bring closure to that family as best we can, but it's been a struggle up till now.
In an attempt to deflect the probing questions directed at him, Adam kept changing the subject, but his answers were nothing short of chilling.
Can I get no, not a Kleenex. Can I be on the table there? Sure can. Not be on the table, just... Sure. Yeah, thank you. No problem.
When he started feeling the pressure, he would do certain things to relieve the pressure. He changed the subject quickly.
Like, what do you think right now, Adam? Wish I was scuba diving. Yeah. Like being in here, is there weight off your shoulders right now? Did you feel like you're... None. No weight off your shoulders? It was just... Can I get a refill, even from a tap on this? Yeah. Awesome.
He'll talk about any subject under the sun, except for the reason why he's sitting across from us. That's just the way Adam's wired.
I have movies from the library that need to be reviewed. I know that seems trivial. I know it does.
It's very trivial right now, I can tell you.
Thanks.
That is the last thing on my mind right now.
While they'd gathered enough evidence to establish that Rori Hache had been in his apartment, their ultimate objective was to uncover the truth about what had transpired and what had led to her tragic fate. Unfortunately, Adam Strong proved to be more than they bargained for. He remained resolutely tight-lipped in response to every question related to Rori.
How did you know Rori?
Sorry, I'm not saying anything.
Did you kill Rori?
Sorry, I'm not saying anything.
Is there other people we should be worried about? Is there other girls out there that we should be worried about that are missing? Just the one.
But would he be able to look directly at the picture of the poor girl and still show indifference?
Can I flip that over now?
No. I want you to look at that.
I did look at it.
Yeah, and it's going to stay there.
Okay.
All right?
No, I'm not going to look at it anymore.
No, you don't have to.
I'm not going to.
The reason we're showing these photographs, we're pulling on his decency as a human being that had little effect on him at all.
When playing on his conscience proved to be ineffective as a ploy, the detectives resorted to appealing to his greed as a last hope to gain his trust.
Oh, you can eat with me? Not let you eat alone, man. Appreciate that, man.
You're trying to build that relationship with him. I'm, treating you with respect. I'm making sure your needs are met. There's a social interaction that's been put in place now where it's just two people. I've got you a meal.
Okay.
You ever owned any guns or anything like that?
No.
No, not into guns.
No, I am.
Yeah, are you?
And I'm very proficient.
Yeah. You collect knives?
I wouldn't say collect,
Yeah.
but I do enjoy a knife.
How many knives do you have? Like those type of knives, like collector type?
I have that one and I have a sword.
As Adam appeared to be answering the questions, Detective Durego attempted to steer the conversation back to the murder investigation. Frustratingly, he reverted to his usual reluctant self.
The ex used to love it in there.
Rory's DNA, would it be on that?
No.
No. Okay, neither. I appreciate it.
Feel free to check.
As the interrogation continued over the next 2 hours, it became increasingly evident that they were going nowhere. Adam's refusal to divulge any relevant information left them with more questions than answers. With no breakthrough in sight, they reluctantly made the decision to end the interrogation.
let's just shut it down now. We could have sat there for another 3 or 6 hours. I don't think we were going to get any different results.
Right, you know what, we'll walk back.
How Rori Hache crossed paths with Adam Strong remained shrouded in mystery. Fortunately for the detectives, Adam was not granted bail, further solidifying his stay in custody. Meanwhile, the Durham police kept the search at Adam's residence alive in their quest for evidence and clues. They also seized his boat and appealed to the public to come forward with information regarding Adam's boating trips on Lake Ontario. Rory's post-mortem report also provided a better insight. She had multiple injuries on her body, including skull fractures. The medical examiner couldn't determine exactly if these wounds were caused before or after her death. Forensic tests also suggested the presence of drugs in her system at the time of her death. Her body also bore signs that she was wearing some sort of restraining device. Inside the home, detectives found a bent hammer with Rory's DNA on it. The detectives believed it was the likely murder weapon. However, it wasn't the most significant find. Just when detectives thought they'd seen it all, another startling discovery was made. In July of 2017, 7 months after Adam Strong's apprehension, inside a kitchen drawer of his home, a specialty hunting knife was discovered.
That knife's only designed for one use and one use only. It's a knife used by hunters for gutting and skinning animals.
This knife was covered in human tissue. Shockingly, forensic analysis revealed that the DNA found on the knife did not match Rori. Instead, it belonged to another female named Candace Fitzpatrick.
Disturbing developments in the murder investigation of Rori Hache, whose partial remains were found inside the central Oshawa home late last year. Police today confirming that they have found the DNA belonging to a second young woman who went missing nearly a decade ago.
Born on February 3, 1989, little is known about Candace Fitzpatrick's early life. Candace's father, William Fitzpatrick, ended up divorcing her mother, whose name has not been made public. After the separation, William moved to Alberta, while Candace remained with her mother in Oshawa. Candace's life took a tumultuous turn, marked by an erratic lifestyle. She disappeared from home at one point, prompting her father to search for her in Oshawa. Upon her return, Candace expressed a desire to live alone. By the time Candace turned 19 in 2008, her life had spiraled into chaos. Just like Rori Hache, she was a troubled young woman struggling with drugs and resorting to selling herself to fund her addiction. Candace frequently vanished from home for days or even weeks at a time, but she always returned, until March of 2008, when her family last saw her. Growing increasingly concerned about her absence, Candace's father, William, embarked on an extensive search for his daughter across the province. He also created a Facebook missing persons group, garnering nearly 1,200 members. Surprisingly, Candace was not officially reported missing to the police until 2010, 2 years after she disappeared. William revealed that he'd spoken to the police multiple times in 2008 regarding Candace, but due to her habits and lifestyle, they'd not taken her disappearance seriously. After a decade of agonizing uncertainty and waiting, Candace Fitzpatrick's family finally received the devastating news they'd always feared. The undeniable resemblance between these two women went beyond just their troubled lives. Their physical appearances bore a striking similarity as well.
Both victims were of more of a petite build, longer, brown hair.
Almost a splitting image of each other.
Ironically, despite their disappearances occurring a decade apart, they both met the same tragic fate at the hands of the same person. It's heartbreaking to think that if Adam had not gone undetected for a decade after Candace's demise, Rori might still be alive today. Candace's remains were not located yet, and there was only one person who held the key to solving this haunting mystery. Investigators were able to get the prosecutors to drop the initial charges off of Adam Strong. Instead, this time he was charged with first-degree murder for both Rori Hache and Candace Fitzpatrick. This gave the detectives an opportunity to interrogate Adam one more time.
Dropping and then the newer charges was, I think, a calculated risk on their part, because the indignity of the body was essentially a slam dunk. There's no evidence to suggest or to prove that he premeditated killing the victim. There's no suggestion that it wasn't just, for example, an accident. That does put a lot of pressure on that interview, because this is essentially the one opportunity you're going to have to sit down with Strong and gather what you can gather. And if you don't, there's a very real risk that he is set free, essentially.
Realizing that the stakes were high, the Durham Police Department brought in Detective Paul Mitten, a highly skilled and experienced interrogator, known for his expertise in handling complex and challenging cases.
My preparation for the interview with Adam Strong actually began by watching his first interview. It was apparent to me that Adam Strong shied away from any direct questions.
I'm not saying anything, I'm sorry.
So I knew that wasn't going to be my approach.
How you doing?
Good, you?
Had better days.
Oh, I'm sure. Paul Mitten.
Adam Strong.
Adam, you call me Paul today.
All right, Paul.
On November 18th, 2018, 11 months after the first one, Adam Strong sat for another interrogation, and it was the most crucial one. To Detective Mitten's surprise, Adam voluntarily came forward with information regarding his treatment in jail.
I have been amazed at how well I have been treated. Other than a few staff members at the 8SAG.
And that's going to continue today.
Yeah.
I can tell you that. I mean,
that's good. That's wonderful.
Well, you know,
Detective Mitten saw it as a positive sign that Adam was at least willing to engage in conversation, even if he hadn't yet broached the subject of the case. Drawing from his knowledge of Adam's temperament gathered from the previous interview, he understood the importance of building a rapport and gaining his trust before delving into the sensitive details of the interrogation. So Detective Mitten was quick to oblige when Adam asked for food. With a bridge of understanding between them now solidly in place, Detective Mitten sensed that it was the right time to start talking about the case.
How old was Rori? 18. Okay, how much of her body did you guys get back? Obviously the entire skeletal structure, right?
well, we obviously, whatever was in the house.
Yes, in the freezer.
Yes.
And how much of it were you able to pull out of the pipes?
Quite a bit. It was bad luck.
Yeah, that's what I tell people. They're like, you're stupid. I'm like, you kidding me?
Well,
that's an awesome way.
Yeah.
I just got greedy, that's all.
The chilling lack of remorse in Adam's demeanor as he discussed his actions would have left any other human being shocked and appalled. However, Detective Mitten knew better than to react to his words. Instead, he continued the interrogation.
You were saying?
So the team gets put together, and like I said, last seen Rori August 30th.
Okay.
Torso pops up, unknown female. September 11th, team's put
Yeah,
together.
she said she knew in her bones that it was her daughter. I read that in an article.
In a bizarre twist, Adam Strong remained adamant in his denial that Rori was pregnant. He even admitted to holding her reproductive organs in his hands, further claiming that she was not carrying a child during her death. The fact that he was far more concerned about proving himself right than taking responsibility for his own actions further revealed a troubling aspect of his character. He was a man with absolutely no concern for human lives whatsoever.
She also swears, like her mother's been in the news many times.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just my daughter, it's my unborn grandchild that was murdered too. And she's adamant.
She was not pregnant.
Her mom is, you know, I think part of the hate on her.
I don't want to go into how I know, but I know.
But, I mean, according to her mom, she was pregnant.
I couldn't be any more sure than someone who did an autopsy.
Okay.
She was not pregnant. I would bet my life. Not that that matters. Anyway.
Would you know what to look for? I wouldn't know what to look for.
I didn't see a baby.
Okay.
Done. Okay. Like, there's no way of getting around that I chopped her up. There's no way.
Okay.
And I understand. But I had to cut all that stuff up. I held her entire reproductive system in my hand.
Thank you for telling me that.
Okay.
In the process of proving his words, Adam had inadvertently blurted out a few things he didn't intend to say. This became a monumental moment in the history of the case, as it was the first time he had actually disclosed something that could implicate him in the murders. Unbelievably, throughout the rest of the interview, Adam left breadcrumbs of information, much to Mitten's delight as he witnessed it.
I said I would have dumped her in 600 feet of water and she would have never come up.
Okay.
Every time there was a little bit of information given to me, maybe even unknowingly by Adam Strong, inside I was giving myself a little fist pump. only because I thought we were advancing the case a little bit here.
8 hours into the interrogation, Detective Paul Mitten decided to change tactics slightly. He confronted Adam Strong with a compelling presentation of the evidence stacked against him.
Like, were you waiting for that to happen, the door knock?
I was like, am I gonna get away with this? I'm like, probably not.
Yeah, again, I would assume from the point the plumbing started to act up.
It was like, oh.
Were you sleeping that night, or were you like, is it nonstop on your mind?
I slept.
So there was some photos of Rory's bruises, and I presented the photographs and asked Adam about them.
Obviously, searched the apartment and found some things in there that lead us to believe that we have what caused that injury.
Yeah?
Well,
in the apartment?
In the apartment.
Wow.
So, did that surprises you?
Yes.
At this point, the surprising aspect of this interrogation was not just Adam's intrigue about the presented evidence, but the degree of his excitement that seemed almost unbelievable. Mitten kept him engaged in the conversation.
So, the 24th is when you start this. You said Christmas Eve?
Yes.
Are you doing this while it's frozen, or is it partially defrosted?
Completely defrosted.
Okay. Now that would take several hours, wouldn't it?
No, not in a bathtub full of hot water.
Oh, okay. Like, within a couple hours?
I wouldn't wager. I had to fill the bathtub up a few times.
To keep the water hot?
Yes.
Gotcha.
I don't know if I should really be talking about that, but ultimately you do have me on the... Yeah. There's no getting around that.
Yep. And so, like, this was all one piece, and then this was all one piece?
I couldn't... Yeah, really? Sorry, man. I don't remember.
Really?
Yeah, it wasn't important to me, man.
Okay.
I know that might sound cold and callous, but it just...
I just assume it would be like the 9/11.
No, not at all.
You just remember this because it's so, like, monumental.
I did not feel that way at all.
Adam was confident that the conversation between them was strictly limited to the dismemberment of the bodies. Little did he know that his indirect admissions and subtle revelations were providing the detectives with crucial inferences about the entire sequence of events surrounding the heinous crimes. After 10 hours, the interrogation came to an end when Paul Mitten felt that he had all the information he needed.
How come you got brought in? Are you just like a lead?
No, you know what? I talked to people further.
Okay, that's
like,
just it.
I do a lot of interviews, that's all.
Like, if you never knew, like, you'd go and have a beer with me, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I would.
Yeah.
All right, well, I'm going to blast.
Man, go get some sleep, dude.
Listen, I appreciate you sticking it out.
Well, you didn't really have a choice.
No, but...
I probably said more than I should have.
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably. But that's okay.
I got nowhere to go, other than back to the cell with a concrete slab. Horrible.
There was no clear confession where he said, this is how I killed so-and-so, and this is how I killed so-and-so. But it was a series of inculpatory statements, and I think at the end of the day, I'm sure he wishes he hadn't said as much as he did.
On September 28, 2020, 12 years after Candace went missing and 3 years after Rori went missing, Adam Strong went on trial for both of these murders. Despite the evidence piled up against him, he pleaded not guilty to both charges. During the trial, the prosecution meticulously presented a wealth of evidence, including that chilling interrogation footage, to support their case against Adam Strong. The testimonies of 5 women who had been assaulted by him further added to the weight of the prosecution's claims. Though Adam did not disclose the details of Rori's death during the interrogation, the prosecution constructed their theories based on the available evidence. According to their account, Adam enticed Rori to his home with the promise of money for physical relations. Once inside, he restrained her in a disturbing BDSM-style contraption and savagely beat her with the hammer found in his home. Sadly, no one was living upstairs at that time, so no one could have heard her screams. Following her tragic death, he dismembered her lifeless body and disposed of the torso in the Oshawa Harbor. Cell phone data placed Adam in the area on September 4, 2017, a week before Rori's torso was found, adding to the mounting evidence against him. Similarly, the prosecution believed that Candace had suffered the same fate at Adam's hands, but at that point, they had not yet located her remains. The defense, however, denied Adam's involvement in Rori's murder, claiming that her death resulted from an overdose and Adam had simply tried to dispose of the body. As for Candace, The defense contended that there was insufficient evidence to prove she died in Adam's home. They also pointed out the limited size of the freezer, suggesting that it could not have accommodated the remains of 2 victims. Nonetheless, after carefully reviewing all the evidence, Judge Mr. Joseph DeLuca was firmly convinced of Adam Strong's involvement in the murders. He saw through the defense's theories and concluded that the evidence presented by the prosecution was compelling and incriminating. In the court, Adam tried to blame his actions on his troubled childhood. He claimed that he'd suffered a traumatic assault at the tender age of 4, an event that had left an indelible mark on his psyche. He was also said to have struggled to cope with the overwhelming emotions and trauma from his past, leading him to succumb to devilish thoughts. He even offered condolences to the victims' families, yet he didn't seem to mean a word. He exhibited an alarming level of indifference and lack of remorse for the lives he'd taken. The evidence presented during Adam Strong's trial made it clear that he was fully aware of the gravity of his actions and the consequences they carried. It was apparent that the man knew exactly what he was doing and had no qualms about it. In fact, he saw prison as a viable solution to his dire circumstances. Due to loneliness and financial distress, he was willing to trade his freedom for the basic necessities that prison could offer. According to Canadian law, an individual may be charged with first-degree murder under certain circumstances. These circumstances include premeditated murder, where the act was planned and deliberate, and cases involving police officers or prison workers, reflecting the severity of the offense. First-degree murder charges can also apply if the act occurs during the commission of other serious crimes, such as assault, kidnapping, terrorism, theft, and similar offenses. However, in certain situations, a murder charge may be reduced to manslaughter if it can be demonstrated that the individual acted in the heat of passion caused by sudden provocation. It was determined that Rori Hache died during an assault, so Adam Strong was found guilty of first-degree murder. He was convicted of manslaughter regarding the death of Candace Fitzpatrick.
Judge found that Strong murdered Rori Hache while committing a sexual act and died of blunt force trauma to the head. But because Candace's body was never recovered, while it was possible she met the same fate, he was not satisfied beyond a reasonable doubt that she was murdered and found him guilty of the lesser charge.
In May 2021, Adam Strong was handed a life sentence for his first-degree murder conviction in the killing of Rori Hache. Additionally, he received an 18-year prison term to be served concurrently for killing Candace Fitzpatrick. This was the highest possible sentence permissible within the country's legal framework. Moments before Adam Strong was taken into prison in handcuffs, the judge directly addressed him with these powerful words: "Your moment before us is done. From here, you'll go to prison. You will never be seen in public again. In time, you will be forgotten. You will neither be famous nor infamous. You will simply be gone." The sentencing marked the end of a long and painful journey for the families of both victims, and they were seen celebrating outside the courtroom after the sentencing hearing.
He addressed Adam. He let Adam know on no uncertain terms what he did was wrong, and he's being punished for it.
I think the judge did an incredible job of bringing this man to his knees.
Yeah.
I feel amazing. Today we let them rest. Today this monster's off our street, and he's no longer a part of our day.
Though nothing could bring back their loved ones, the families felt that justice was served. In July 2021, Strong provided crucial information regarding the whereabouts of Candace Fitzpatrick's remains. Acting on this tip-off, on November 4, 2021, he accompanied the police to a general area near Secreto Drive and Britannia Avenue East in Oshawa, where he claimed to have buried the body. Subsequently, on November 8th, the authorities were able to locate the remains. Following the forensic examination, the remains were positively identified as those of Candace Fitzpatrick on November 13, 2021. The conclusive identification was announced through a press conference on February 16, 2022. Candace's father, William, was still in disbelief.
Did you ever think you'd see this day?
No. Never thought I'd see her remains, ever.
The reason behind Adam Strong's sudden change of heart remains a mystery, but speculation suggests that he may have been seeking fame and recognition for his actions. Despite the tragic circumstances that brought them together, the Hache and Fitzpatrick families have remained supportive of one another and are finding strength and healing as they navigate through the difficult aftermath of these horrific events. The cases of Rori Hache and Candace Fitzpatrick are solved, but police suspect that Adam Strong might have been involved in the deaths of other women. In June 2022, the police found some clothing evidence in Adam's apartment. However, they've not divulged specific details about this evidence, keeping it confidential as they continue their investigation. This story is undeniably tragic and profoundly disturbing. The most unsettling aspect is that Adam Strong managed to remain completely off the police's radar throughout his heinous acts. He operated unnoticed, hidden in plain sight. Neighbors lived around him, extended greetings, offering help, and inviting him to social gatherings, completely oblivious to the sinister truth that lurked within him. The chance that this case was ultimately solved due to a twist of fate is absolutely terrifying. One can't help but wonder if there were any red flags that could have been recognized earlier. Were there any missed opportunities to prevent his atrocities? What do you think could have been done to keep this man off the streets? Let us know your thoughts in the comment section. On June 15th, 2023, just 3 days before Father's Day, a horrifying crime occurred in the peaceful village of New Richmond, Ohio. It left the community in disbelief and sorrow. The incident was so disturbing that the prosecuting attorney asked for the highest bond amount ever seen in the county.
We're going to ask this court to issue a bond we've never asked for before. I'm going to ask for a bond of $20 million. I hope I never need to request such a bond again.
This incident left everyone involved with the question, what could be the motive behind this unthinkable act? On a Thursday, June 15th, 2023, the weather in New Richmond was cloudy and it was around 75 degrees outside. Everything seemed normal, like a typical suburban American day. But this day turned out to be anything but ordinary. In the late afternoon, people noticed a teenage girl running down the road with a look of fear on her face. She was crying out for help, and her cries were filled with desperation. Her main goal was to reach the safety of a nearby firehouse where she could get help for something unimaginable that had happened to her. At exactly 4:18 p.m., a woman driving along Laurel Lindale Road saw this teenage girl running with fear and heard her shouting, "My stepfather is killing everyone." Out of concern, she immediately stopped her car and talked to the girl to understand what was happening. Realizing the seriousness of the situation, the woman quickly called 911 to get help for the girl and anyone else who might be in danger.
There's a girl running down the street saying that her stepfather is killing everyone in her family.
And what did the female say to you?
And she says that her stepfather is killing everybody in her house. I did. I'm on the phone with them right now.
Did she say how or what was happening?
I asked her to get in the car with me, and she said she couldn't leave her family.
Deputies received a distressing message through their radio dispatch. They were informed that a man had started shooting, and his own children were the targets of his violent actions. To understand the full story of what happened to this teenage girl and the terrifying events that unfolded, we need to start from the beginning and delve into the details of the situation. In the village of New Richmond, there is a house located along the 1900 block of Laurel Lindale Road. This house was home to the Doerman family, which consisted of Chad Christopher Doerman, who was 32 years old, who lived there with his 34-year-old wife, Laura Doerman. Together, they had 3 young sons named Clayton, 7 years old, Hunter, 4 years old, and Chase, 3 years old. Laura also had a teenage daughter named Alexis from a previous relationship who lived with them. The Doerman children were full of lively energy and were very close to each other. They loved spending time with their cherished dogs, playing baseball, and supporting one another through all kinds of situations. However, their story took a darker turn on June 15th, 2023, when Chad Doerman came home from work earlier than usual. He asked his wife, Laura, and their 3 sons to join him in the master bedroom for a nap. At that time, their daughter Alexis was in the family room watching television. Everything seemed normal and according to routine. After lying down with his wife and 3 sons, Chad got out of bed and went towards the gun safe next to his bed. Inside the safe was a Marlin Model HC-22 rifle. He took the rifle out of the safe and loaded it with a magazine containing bullets. Shockingly, he then shot 4-year-old Hunter twice. When the mother, Laura, heard the sound of the gunshots, she woke up and rushed to help her injured son. She immediately started providing aid to him and yelled at her other sons to run to safety. The situation was incredibly alarming and distressing for the family, as Chad's actions were completely unexpected and violent. At that moment, the sister, Alexis, heard the gunshots and quickly went to the master bedroom. When she arrived, she saw Chad holding the rifle, looking furious. Alexis was frightened, but she didn't let fear stop her, and despite the dangerous situation, she bravely attempted to save her siblings. She ran after Clayton to the back of the house, telling him to keep running to safety. But Chad followed them and continued shooting at the boy while he was running out into the backyard. The boy got hit by the bullets and fell down. Chad then came closer and shot him again from a very close distance. After Alexis ran back to the house, she grabbed her other brother Chase and ran away while holding him. As they got close to the road, Chad caught up with them and pointed the rifle at them, telling her to let go of her brother. Chad tried to fire at them, but the rifle didn't fire because it was empty, with no ammunition left. After the third son escaped, he ran to his mother, who had gone outside to help Clayton, who was shot earlier. Meanwhile, Alexis started running toward the nearby Monroe Township Fire Department for help. She told a passerby who stopped to help her that her father was killing everyone as she fled. While they're at the house, Chad approached the third boy and Laura. He bit Laura while trying to take her son from her arms. In the struggle, Laura managed to grab the rifle, but Chad shot her through her thumb. Unfortunately, during the chaos, Laura dropped her son, and Chad shot the son in the head. After this horrific act, Chad sat on the side stoop of the house, watching as Laura desperately tried to save her children's lives. It seemed like he wanted to cause her even more pain. The police soon arrived at the crime scene after receiving multiple 911 calls from neighbors and people driving by.
Where's he at?
He's shooter's on the porch.
Get him right here. You got him on the porch.
We've asked. That's the last place we've been told.
You show me your hands now! Stand up and walk towards us! Stand up now! Walk towards us! Stand up with your hands up!
We know we got a visual in the veil. Not showing his hands and not following commands.
Stand up now!
Still not showing hands, so we're following commands. His name is Chad Doerman. Chad Doerman.
I know, but we can't.
If people need first aid and he's not complying, and you know he's a shooter, shoot him.
We gotta find cover first. We ain't no good if we ain't safe ourselves. Hey, no. We need to come from this side where we can see them. Don't take cover behind her. We see them. We're going to approach from this side. We got cover. Right here.
6 Robert, 29 and 63 is type out.
We're not working right now.
Show us your hands now! Stand up! Stand up! Stand up! Stand up now! Stand up! Stand the up!
EMS to stage and air crews are going to go ahead and fly whenever any units can advise.
Get your hands out here. 72. Cover 21. Send the air.
If those guys can confirm that there's people that need first aid and that's the shooter who's not complying, they need to take care of the victims. They have to shoot him and shoot him.
Man, I ain't trying to hurt nobody. I'm completely sober. Never did drugs. 63, we're 21. Get the EMS over here. Well, I did drugs with a flip, but I don't do drugs now. I'm sober. I'm not trying to fight you. 63.
Get your butt inside. Allan, get your butt inside.
We on primary?
Now.
29, we got 3 kids down.
3 kids down, 16 up.
Allan.
63, we're 21. Have EMS respond over here.
You're clear, they're being advised.
Robert 34, just started mass casualty response.
63, do you want them to respond to the Laurel Lindale address? Where exactly do you need them?
We're right in the front yard. What are you doing, man?
Hey, are you copying all this?
Can I roll over? I ain't gonna hurt you. I ain't gonna hurt nobody.
You got anything on you?
No, I ain't got nothing, man. Phone, that's it.
Chad was behaving strangely after he committed the terrible act of killing his 3 sons. He kept saying things like, "I won't do anything, I'm sober," which indicated that he was aware of what he'd done and what was happening around him. Surprisingly, he remained calm and showed no emotions, despite the fact that he'd just taken the lives of his own children moments ago. When the police arrived, Chad didn't resist or try to escape. Instead, he cooperated and allowed them to arrest him without any trouble. He even informed the police about his dogs and showed concern for their safety, which was unexpected considering his impulsive and terrible act. Chad's behavior raised many questions about his state of mind and motives. Police quickly arrested Chad and took him to Claremont Police Station for questioning. After making sure the area was safe, more deputies carefully checked the surroundings. It was incredibly sad to find 3 young victims who had been shot. They were in critical condition and unresponsive. The boy's mother, Laura, was also found outside the house with a gunshot wound to her hand, which she had bravely endured trying to protect her children. Recognizing the urgent need for help, they quickly provided medical aid to the mother and rushed her to a nearby hospital for treatment. Sadly, by the time the police arrived, all 3 boys had already passed away. During the investigation that followed, detectives discovered that Chad had allegedly first killed 4-year-old Hunter by shooting him twice inside the house. After that, 7-year-old Clayton had tried to escape and ran into the field behind the house, but Chad chased him and shot him from behind. To be sure Clayton was dead, Chad fired 2 more rounds. Finally, Chad took 3-year-old Chase from his mother's arms and killed him as well. The entire community was shocked and saddened by this horrific incident.
I'm shocked, to be honest with you. We moved here 6 years ago, and the place is great, and New Richmond's coming up, and you just hate to see anything like this anywhere.
All of a sudden I hear boom, boom, and at like 5 more, I'm like, that's 7 shots. That's shots. Like, there's no way. So I was freaking out like this before I got ready and everything, and I don't know, man. Before that, I saw 2 cars right here on this street zoom as fast as humanly possible. It was like something's going down.
When Chad was brought in for questioning, he made shocking statements to the law enforcement officers. He said things like, "I did it, take me to jail," and "I shouldn't have shot Laura and my sons." During an audio and video recorded interview, Chad revealed something even more disturbing. He'd been thinking about shooting his son since October 2022 for almost 8 months. He admitted that the thoughts of killing his own children were weighing so heavily on him that he hadn't slept for 3 or 4 days before the murders. It's hard to imagine what could drive someone to do such a terrible thing. Chad faced serious charges of 3 counts of aggravated murder after admitting to shooting his 3 sons with a rifle. After detectives interviewed him, he was then taken to the Claremont County Jail, where he was held without bond. The next day, on June 16, 2023, he appeared in the Claremont County Municipal Court for a hearing to decide whether he'd be granted bond or not. The court took this case very seriously due to the severity of the charges against him. 1 week after the shooting, a grand jury in Claremont County added more charges to Chad's case. In total, there were 21 charges against him, including 9 counts of aggravated murder, 3 counts of kidnapping, and 4 counts of felonious assault. The indictment stated that Chad had planned and thought about the murders beforehand, admitting to having planned them for several months. Chad pleaded not guilty to all the charges against him. His lawyer decided not to ask for bond, possibly because they knew it would be difficult to get him released. The judge, Victor Haddad, saying,
"At this point in time, bond's going to be set in the amount of $20 million cash or surety."
The county prosecutor, Mark Takulvi, made it clear that he intended to fully prosecute Chad for the crimes he was accused of.
First and foremost, I want to start out by expressing the deepest sympathy I have for his family on this unspeakable tragedy. We do have, I can't go into a whole lot of facts, all right, because this is a death penalty case, and my goal is to have this man executed for slaughtering these 3 little boys. It is, let me try to figure out a way to put this. It is an incomprehensible act of horror that he perpetrated on his family. So again, that is my most important focus right now, is to ensure that they're protected and they're safe. And my hope and wish and prayer is that someday we will be able to find peace. But factually, I've said what I said on the record, and I'm going to stick with that, right?
Why was it, with how complicated the death penalty is in Ohio right now, and how much extra work it adds to your office, why was it important for you to seek this?
I'll let the facts speak for themselves. He slaughtered his 3 children in the most brutal fashion. you can imagine. As I mentioned in court, the extra work is no extra work at all. It's what we do. This merits our attention, our devotion, and our effort.
Thoughts on that initial not guilty plea?
That has to be done.
This means that Chad will remain in jail until his trial because he was not granted bail. Chad Doerman's next court appearance was scheduled for July 5, 2023 for a pretrial hearing, but no further details have been released by the police. After the tragic incident where Chad allegedly shot and killed his 3 sons, one big question remains unanswered. Why did he do it? As of now, the authorities have not been able to determine a clear motive for the killings. Chad's father, Keith Doerman, who's 51 years old, spoke with the New York Times and said that he and his wife Gloria are still struggling to understand how their son could have done such a terrible thing and murdered his own children. They said, "He just snapped. There's something going on in his life that he couldn't handle anymore. I can't talk to him. They aren't letting me talk to him, so I don't have any answers. He probably hid a lot of stuff from me." According to their neighbor, Richard Kincannon, Chad Doerman's behavior before the shooting was concerning. He described Chad as having a bad temper and constantly yelling at his wife and kids. Chad treated his wife poorly and seemed angry all the time. This indicates that from the beginning, he was not treating his family well and had a troubled relationship with them. Looking into Chad Doerman's background, investigators examined public records to find possible clues. They found that Chad had a minor criminal history, including a misdemeanor charge of criminal damage when he was 18, but that case was dismissed after restitution was paid. In 2010, he was charged with domestic violence for allegedly choking his father, but that case was also dismissed when the witness didn't show up in court. He also accumulated several traffic infractions and violations, mostly related to speeding. The police had been to his house twice since 2020, apart from the recent incident, but no details about those visits were provided. On the county auditor's website, they found that Chad bought his house, which was a converted manufactured home on 3 acres of land, for $75,000, and the family was up to date with property tax payments. In an important study, Dr. Philip Resnick, a well-known psychiatrist, conducted thorough research in 131 cases of parents killing their children. He published his findings in the American Journal of Psychiatry in 1968. Dr. Resnick identified 5 main reasons for this type of crime, which he called filicide. One reason is altruistic filicide, where a parent believes that their child is suffering too much in a cruel world, and they see killing the child as a way to end their suffering. Another reason is fatal maltreatment, which happens when a child dies due to abuse or neglect, even if it wasn't the parent's intention to kill them. Spousal revenge killings involve harming a partner by targeting and harming their children. Unwanted child killings are where the parent may kill the child because they didn't want them or feel burdened by their presence. Acutely psychotic killings are cases of severe mental illness where a parent may harm their child due to hallucinations or delusions. It became evident that Chad Doerman fit into the category known as family annihilators, joining the unfortunate list of parents who commit such heinous acts, but the motive behind it remains unknown. Rachel Brown, Laura's sister, started a fundraiser on GoFundMe to help with the costs of the funerals for Laura's 3 children. In her heartfelt message, Rachel expresses the immense pain and sadness of losing her sister's amazing kids. She acknowledged that nothing could ever make the situation better or okay, but she asked for people's generosity to help ease the financial burden that came with this tragic loss. Rachel believed that no one should have to go through such a heartbreaking experience, and she appealed to the kindness and empathy of others to support her family during this difficult time. On June 26, 2023, a special event called A Celebration of Life was held to honor and remember the 3 boys who tragically lost their lives. The community members gathered at the First Baptist Church of Glen Estey and wore bright colors as requested by the family to symbolize positivity and hope. Even though it was a sad occasion, people cherished the memories they had with the boys and showed their determination to stand by the family during these tough times. To raise funds and show support, a memorial was organized at a baseball field and T-shirts were sold. The daughter, Alexis, also expressed her wish to participate in a sports tournament in memory of her brothers, showcasing the strength of the family and the love and support they received from the community. May the memory of Clayton, Hunter, and Chase live on, and may this case serve as a reminder to cherish and protect the bonds of family and community. What are your thoughts on this case? What do you think could be the possible motive that made Chad Doerman kill his own sons? On the night of November 28, 2001, something really dreadful happened in the calm city of Chester, South Carolina. The house where one of the older couples in town lived suddenly caught fire. By 2 a.m., firefighters were hard at work trying to put out the fire. They thought the house was empty, but once the fire was out, they made a shocking discovery. The bodies of 66-year-old Joe Frank Pittman and his 62-year-old wife, Joy Pittman, were found inside. It was not just the fire that killed them. Their 12-year-old grandson, Christopher, who lived with them, was missing, which raised a lot of questions. Where was Christopher? Who had attacked the elderly couple? To really understand the situation around the murders, let's begin right from the start. When Christopher Frank Pittman was born on April 9, 1989, he lived in Oxford, Florida, with his father Joe Pittman and older sister Danielle. Chris's mother had left the family when he was only 2 years old, but despite this, Chris was a caring and gentle young boy. As he grew up, he remained shy, spoke softly, and had excellent manners. Chris never showed any violent behavior and was always polite to everyone he met.
Christopher was funny, he was gregarious. When he was comfortable, you really saw this fun-loving side of him,
Chris spent his childhood moving around different homes. He spent his early years with his maternal grandmother, Dell. For a while, after his father remarried, he lived with his dad and stepmom. When that marriage ended in divorce, Chris went to live with his paternal grandparents, Joe Frank and Joy Robert, in Chester, South Carolina. Chris was really close to them and saw them like his own parents because they loved him a lot. But in 2001, 12-year-old Chris faced a similar pain when he went back to Florida and discovered that his biological mom had returned. This unexpected return brought a lot of confusion and changes for Chris. Imagine he had to grapple with accepting his mother again after believing for a decade that she'd left him. Just when Chris and Danielle were beginning to adjust to having their mother around, she left them once more. And this time, it felt like everything fell apart for the family. That same year, Chris's father Joe was going through his third divorce. With one big hurt followed by another, Chris felt really sad and alone. It's alleged that Joe himself treated the children poorly and was even violent toward them. During this tough period, Danielle noticed that Chris was starting to show signs of anxiety. Chris also started acting aggressively, and his behavior became more and more extreme. As the pressure on Chris got really heavy, he decided to run away from home. He wanted to be back with his grandparents in Chester because they made him feel safe and stable. But his plan didn't work out, and the police found him 15 miles from home and brought him back to his father. But 12-year-old Chris was starting to feel really desperate. He didn't want to stay in Florida with his father and sister anymore. As his mental health plummeted, Chris began oscillating between aggressive outbursts and episodes of depression. One day, things got really bad when he grabbed a knife and told Danielle he wanted to hurt himself. He said he'd rather die than live with them. After this distressing incident, his father Joe decided to send him to his grandparents in Chester. In November 2001, Joe took Chris to South Carolina so he could grow up in a stable environment with his grandparents. The people in Chester knew Chris already, so Joe and Joy often took him to church with them. While people were glad to see Chris, they were also surprised at how much he changed. He wasn't the happy and expressive kid anymore. He was a teenager with a bad temper. He'd get into fights with a lot of people, even his classmates. On November 27, 2001, Chris choked a fellow student on the school bus, and the school summoned his grandparents to meet the principal the next day. And it didn't stop there. He caused trouble at church, too. On November 28, 2001, he kicked the back of the piano bench during an afternoon choir practice, causing a big disturbance. These aggressive actions in public were starting to test his grandparents' patience. His grandfather, Joe, was especially mad. They had to leave the church early, and when they got home, Joe gave Chris a spanking for behaving badly. But something much darker was going on with Chris that they didn't realize. 4 hours later, in the early morning of November 29, 2001, around 1:40 a.m., someone dialed 911, and that call changed everything. The caller said that the Pittman's house was on fire. When the firefighters got there, things were really chaotic.
People were running. There was a lot of yelling. The question, of course, at this time of night who was home. Was anyone home? There was a vehicle missing.
When the firefighters got there, things were really chaotic. People were running around and yelling. The firefighters quickly worked to put out the fire and stop it from causing more damage. No one knew if anyone was inside the house. However, the family's car wasn't parked in front of the house like usual, so people assumed the Pittman family weren't home when the fire started. The fire department worked for quite a few hours to put out the fire. It was already morning when they finally entered the house. Sadly, they found 2 bodies inside. Those were the remains of Joe and Joy Pittman. This news shocked everyone. Joe and Joy were a much-loved elderly couple in the community, and their loss was devastating. But one question added to their worry. If Joe and Joy were gone, where was Chris? Residents and firefighters looked for him, but he wasn't anywhere to be seen. This was strange because why would a 12-year-old boy be away from home in the middle of the night? By that time, Chris's dad in Florida got a call that his parents' house was on fire. He rushed to Chester and discovered a terrible truth. His parents had been killed by being shot at close range before the fire even began. Joe and Joy each had 2 gunshot wounds in their heads. Joe and Joy Pittman had been kind and good people. It was shocking that such a terrible fate should befall them. Why would someone want to hurt and kill an elderly couple in such a horrible way? The search for Chris had already started, and it didn't take long before he was found. Chris was discovered by 2 deer hunters in the woods, a few miles away from his grandparents' burned house. They found him in his grandparents' SUV, which had broken down. Chris told them a troubling story. He said he'd been kidnapped by a large black man who'd shot his grandparents, set their house on fire, and taken him away. The deer hunters were leaning toward believing him, but something about the situation didn't feel quite right to them.
He never to me showed no kind of emotion, like somebody that would be kidnapped and brought here.
Even though he was just 12 years old, Chris seemed oddly calm. He wasn't acting the way you'd expect a child who'd experienced something so terrible. Kids his age would be scared and upset, but Chris didn't show any tears or strong emotions about his grandparents being shot and their house being set on fire. They took him to the police, and everyone was relieved to see Chris was safe. He told the police the same story and explained it in so much detail that they believed him right away. However, the police also realized that Chris was acting oddly calm about what had happened. They thought he was in shock, a kind of reaction to really bad events. So they sent him to a sheriff's investigator named Lucinda McKellar, who had the expertise to talk to kids. Chris spent the afternoon with Lucinda playing cards and watching TV. She tried to talk to him and make him comfortable, but even she was surprised by how calm Chris was and how well he was dealing with everything. However, there was someone who didn't think Chris was telling the truth. This person was investigator Scott Williams, who was looking into the fire at the Pittman's home. Williams was bothered by the lack of emotions displayed by Chris. Also, there were no signs of a struggle or fighting back, like what usually happens during a kidnapping. So, on the evening of November 29th, Williams went to Lucinda's house to ask Chris about the incident. That's when the real story started to become clear. As Williams questioned Chris about inconsistencies in his story, the shocking truth was finally revealed. Chris admitted that on the evening of November 28, 2001, he'd taken his grandfather's shotgun and quietly went into their room 4 hours after his grandfather had given him a spanking. Chris, who was upset about this punishment, ended up shooting his grandparents 4 times while they were sleeping. Then he went downstairs, got a box of matches, and used it to start a fire by lighting papers and candles. The fire slowly spread throughout the house. Chris then ran out of the house and took the car parked outside, the gun he used to shoot his grandparents, the family dog, and also he took $33 in cash that was on the side table next to Joe's bed.
To be sitting in a room with a 12-year-old boy that just killed his grandparents is one thing, and then to actually, hear him say, "I'm not sorry," to what he had done to the people that he supposedly loved the most in his life was pretty shocking.
My God, this is a 12-year-old, and you don't want to believe it, but that's what he was telling us.
12-year-old Chris shocked everyone by admitting to carefully planning murder, theft, and arson. It was really hard for people to believe because he seemed to love his grandparents a lot. He'd even threatened to take his own life in order to live with them. So why would he kill them? Had something terrible happened to Chris that month that made him do this awful thing? Somehow, Chris's father had an explanation for all the questions. He believed that Chris didn't actually want to kill his grandparents, but that Zoloft, a medication, was responsible for his actions. Zoloft is an antidepressant, a type of medicine used to treat depression. It's part of a group of medications called SSRIs, or selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, which includes drugs like Paxil and Prozac. Doctors often give Zoloft to young people for treating depression. But how could an antidepressant be connected to a 12-year-old killing his grandparents? To understand this tragic story, let's go back to the first time in Florida when Chris had a really tough time. Shortly after Chris's mother left the family again, things got really tough for Chris. He started having anger outbursts, which gradually turned into depression. When Chris attempted to run away from home and made threats of hurting himself, his father had him committed to a mental health facility for 6 days. A psychiatrist at the facility diagnosed Chris with a mild chronic depression. He also noted that Chris acted stubbornly and had negative behavioral patterns. But instead of referring Chris to a therapist, the psychiatrist prescribed him Paxil, an SSRI antidepressant. But things got worse when Chris moved back to his grandparents' house in Chester, South Carolina. The pharmacy in Chester didn't have Paxil, so another doctor in the town prescribed him Zoloft instead. However, there are some problems associated with Zoloft use that the doctor didn't pay attention to. First, both Paxil and Zoloft are mind-altering SSRI drugs, but they work in different ways. Switching suddenly from one to the other can be very risky, especially for kids. Second, all medicines like Paxil and Zoloft can be risky for young children and teenagers that are still growing up, both in their minds and their bodies. Not long before the terrible event happened, Chris's sister Danielle went to see him in Chester. She noticed oddities in his behavior that she believed were effects of Zoloft. When talking, Chris would often begin a sentence but never finish it, and according to Danielle, this happened about 7 or 8 times. It was like his thoughts were running faster than he could speak them. Around that same time, Chris had talked to his Aunt Mindy on the phone and told her he was experiencing a burning sensation all over his body. It was so uncomfortable that he needed medicines to help with the pain.
He says, Aunt Mindy, I don't like taking them because I feel like my skin is crawling and then I'm just on fire. It's like a fire burning I can't put out. And he's describing this to me. And I'm just kind of going, that's weird.
On November 26, 2001, only 2 days before the terrible incident, the doctor in Chester was told about the problems Chris was having because of the medicine. However, instead of stopping or changing the medication, the doctor decided to double the dosage and increase Chris's daily dose of Zoloft from 100 milligrams to 200 milligrams. Chris's family was certain that the high dose of Zoloft had messed with Chris's mind and made him take such a drastic action against his own grandparents. Following Chris's confession, the police arrested him and charged him for the double murders of his grandparents, Joe Frank and Joy Pittman. The prosecution asked the family court to handle the case instead of a regular court, and this request was accepted. The case quickly made it to the front pages of all the newspapers. Lawyer Andy Vickery, known for standing up against big pharmaceutical companies, stepped in as Chris's defense attorney. He'd never encountered a situation where a child's use of antidepressants led to murder, but he believed that antidepressants might have played a role in the situation. Vickery also had a theory that he was planning to reveal during the trial.
The theory of our case is that a powerful mind-altering drug was given to a kid that shouldn't have got it in the first place, and it triggered very violent behavior.
But if it happens with Chris, why wouldn't it be happening to all kinds of kids and adults who take the drug?
It doesn't affect the majority. No one has ever said that it did. But if you happen to be in that small, vulnerable subpopulation, then you've drawn what we in Texas call the black bean.
Which means?
Which means you're the unlucky one.
Chris did have a tough childhood with no mother around and his father dealing with marital problems. After the initial hearing, the defense team portrayed Chris as a child who was given medicines affecting his mind and who was facing a lot of challenges at only 12 years old. However, the judge didn't agree. He decided that Chris should be treated like an adult in court because he'd killed his grandparents in an awful manner by shooting them in the head and burning down their house.
When someone takes a medication under a doctor's advice, they don't expect to become intoxicated to the point that they're out of their minds.
The trial began on January 31st, 2005, more than 3 years after the murders. By then, Chris, who'd stayed in custody, had turned 16 years old. He was tried as an adult in court. Chris's defense team argued that the higher Zoloft dose might have triggered his volatile behaviors and actions, including choking a classmate on the bus and causing trouble at church. They believed it had influenced his behavior over time, leading up to the crime and the terrible murders. During those 3 years in custody, Chris's story started to change. He still admitted to killing his grandparents, but he modified some of the details. He claimed that his grandparents had spanked him on the evening of November 28, 2001, and that he killed them under the influence of a Zoloft overdose. According to Chris, the Zoloft had caused something called command hallucinations, where he heard a voice telling him to murder his grandparents.
These voices in my head just echoing through my head and keep getting louder and louder and louder.
And what were these voices say?
Kill.
The defense team had a tough job trying to make the jury believe that Chris's actions were caused by side effects of the medicine. To support their argument, they brought in 2 psychiatrists. The first expert, Dr. Lynette Atkins, said that on the night Chris killed his grandparents, he was not thinking rationally. He was in a state of psychosis where he heard voices that ordered him to shoot his grandparents and set their house on fire.
I think he had no control over killing his grandparents.
But this is a child who, after killing his grandparents, set the house on fire. I mean, doesn't that look like a child who knew what he was doing and tried to cover his tracks?
She explained that Chris's lack of feelings after the murders was also the result of the medicine's effects. The second expert, Dr. Richard Caput, was a psychiatrist who had worked for 14 years with the FDA, an organization that tests medicines. He had originally given permission for Zoloft to be tested on people. However, he now believed that the medicine could greatly alter the behavior of young people by triggering chemical-based anger.
Do you have an opinion as to whether Christopher Pittman was involuntarily intoxicated by Zoloft?
Yes, I do. I believe he was. I believe he did not have the ability to form criminal intent on that date due to intoxication with Zoloft.
Also, during the 3 years Chris spent in jail before his trial, a different doctor said that Chris was still struggling with intense feelings. He noted that Chris behaved aggressively and used mean words related to race toward the prison guards. Chris himself stated that his father Joe used to physically punish him and act in a violent manner.
You know, he's made a lot of mistakes that, I could forgive him for him. He didn't know how to discipline us. I mean, he did what he thought was right.
Would he hit you?
Mm-hmm.
With a belt?
Mm-hmm. Belt, anything, really.
So Chris already had violent tendencies, and the defense argued that Zoloft made them worse. While the defense team worked hard to blame Zoloft, the prosecutors worked just as hard to reject that idea. They believed Chris was solely responsible for the crime. They believed that the crime was motivated by Chris's fear of being sent back to Florida after his violent behaviors in the school bus and at church. Chris didn't want to go back to his father, so prosecutors thought he planned the crime carefully to make sure no clues were left behind. They saw him as a mature criminal who could come up with a nasty plan to not only kill his grandparents, but also set their house on fire. To hide what he'd done, he came up with a fake story to fool the authorities.
He's rational enough to know that he's left evidence, which is his dead grandparents. He's rational enough and non-psychotic enough to know that he needs to burn the house. And he sets the fire very intricately. It's a well-planned fire. He uses candles and stacks up paper in certain spots for a slow burn.
Chris made sure the fire wouldn't spread too fast so he could escape safely. And he even saved the family dog. After that, he took the gun and got into the SUV, then drove across the state. The prosecutors didn't believe the defense's claim that Chris heard voices telling him to commit the crime. They pointed out that the sheriff's investigator, Lucinda McKellar, who'd spent time with Chris after the murders, noted that Chris hadn't mentioned anything about hearing such voices.
Did Chris ever tell you he heard voices?
No.
Did he seem manic when you saw him?
No.
Did he seem psychotic?
No.
Did you see Chris as evil, as tough, as knowledgeable as any adult committing that same crime?
This was a very meticulous crime. He was smart enough to do it at 12. I think it was very cold that he walks up and he's close enough to Granddad to shoot him in the mouth to where his teeth are broken and the pellets remain in his head.
The prosecution worked hard to show that the medicine Chris took didn't cause his terrible actions. They argued that Zoloft had been available since the early 1990s and was commonly used to treat depression in the U.S. They argued that there is no other case where this medicine had made someone do such awful things. They also brought in their own medical expert, a psychiatrist named James Ballinger, who supported their view.
There was no evidence that he wasn't thinking correctly. There was lots of evidence that he knew what he had done was wrong.
Ballinger reminded the jury how Chris hadn't shown any guilt or sadness after the murders. Chris himself admitted that he knew his actions were wrong, but he felt unable to stop himself at that moment. He explained that a strong burst of anger took over him on the evening of November 28, 2001.
I mean, you can't control yourself. It's just, I don't know, I mean, you just can't control yourself.
Were you aware you were actually going to get the rifle and loading it? I mean, were you aware of that?
Mm-hmm. It was just like you sitting there watching TV. I mean, everything that's, going on, it can't be stopped.
Had you ever felt that kind of anger before?
Mm-hmm.
What did it feel like?
It's just like it all just exploded. I mean, the littlest thing would just set me off. It was like a bomb that's ready to blow up.
As the trial neared its end, the judge offered a deal to Chris. He could admit to voluntary manslaughter, but the exact punishment wasn't known. The defense team found this offer tricky and declined it. They believed the jury might not all agree that Chris was guilty. However, things turned out differently when, on February 15, 2005, Chris was declared guilty of first-degree murder and given a 30-year prison sentence. Many wondered if this was fair. People who followed the trial and heard the verdict questioned whether justice had truly been done. After the trial, some jury members began to doubt their decision. They said that they'd felt pressured, and one had even talked about the case with his wife during deliberations. So, the original verdict was canceled. The case went to the South Carolina Supreme Court due to appeals. People signed a petition asking that Chris not be sent to an adult prison, but this was denied after Chris admitted his guilt. On June 11, 2010, Chris was finally found guilty of the lesser charges of voluntary manslaughter and was sentenced to 25 years. He'll be free in 2023 when he's 34 years old.
The state of South Carolina has completed this comedy of horrors by inflicting one last crime upon this young man.
While being held at the Allendale Correctional Institution, something remarkable occurred. Chris Pittman, born a biological male, embraced his true identity as a transgender woman and legally changed his name to Kristen Avery Pittman. As Kristen was released on February 22, 2023, she faces a new chapter in her life. But it comes with a condition. She'll need to fulfill 2 years of state supervision through a South Carolina probation office after her release. It's a unique journey of self-discovery and reintegration into society. Chris, now Kristen, still has a lot of years ahead of her, but her family is looking forward to the reunion and the chance to make new memories. But Joe Pittman will always carry the pain of losing his parents that fateful night on 2001. What are your thoughts on this case? Why would a 12-year-old child kill his grandparents whom he loved the most? Was Chris really under the influence of Zoloft? Or were there some hidden reasons?
Devon Arthurs was a neo-Nazi, but in 2017 he converted to the Muslim faith, and he says his roommates made fun of him for it, so he killed them both.
On May 8, 2023, 6 years after the murders happened, Devon finally confessed his guilt by pleading guilty. This surprising twist came after this intense interrogation. As the interrogation unfolded, Devon dropped some seriously unsettling details that flipped the whole case on its head. Yet what transpires when a man contends that his motive for killing was to safeguard everyone else? Can such a claim be believed, or do hidden secrets lie beneath the surface, awaiting revelation? Let's embark on this journey together, delving into the life of the man behind this strange claim. It all started on May 19, 2017, when, in the evening, 18-year-old Devon Arthurs was walking down the street in the Tampa Palms neighborhood of Tampa, Florida, gripping a gun in his hand. Things took a really unexpected turn when he strolled into the leasing office at the Hamptons Apartments. With a mix of shock and disbelief, he told the people there that he'd taken the lives of his 2 roommates. The people around him were totally taken aback by what he said, but what sent shivers down their spines was the sight of that gun in his hand and the unsettling look on the boy's face. He seemed troubled, yet he had this unsettling smile that made it seem like he was almost proud of what he'd done. The property manager was there when this happened. He saw some suspicious-looking spots on Devon's t-shirt that seemed like blood, but he couldn't be certain from where he was standing. Trying to handle the situation, he told Devon to put the gun down and questioned him about who he'd killed. But instead of answering any questions, Devon just walked away without saying a word. In a hurry, the manager called 911 to tell the police what had just happened as he watched Devon walk over to a nearby store called the Green Planet Smoke Shop. Once Devon went inside, his face showed that something was really bothering him, and he seemed very worried. Suddenly, he pulled out the gun and used it to threaten 3 people, holding them hostage. This caused a lot of noise and confusion in the store as everyone started yelling and trying to run out of the store. Just then, the store owner stepped up and bravely asked Devon what he wanted, pleading for him to let the hostages go. But Devon appeared really confused, as if he couldn't grasp what was happening. After a short while, the police officers from the Tampa police station arrived and persuaded Devon to free the people he'd taken as hostages. Surprisingly, the moment Devon spotted the police, he surrendered and let the hostages go. It's almost like he was waiting for the police to arrive. He kept saying over and over that he had killed his roommates. The police were curious to understand the situation better, so they asked Devon to provide more details about what had happened. Following their conversation, Devon guided them to his apartment where he killed his roommates. To learn more about the details, let's step back in time when Devon Arthurs came into the world on March 18, 1999 in Tampa, Florida. He was a typical kid, simple, regular, and full of curiosity. He loved exploring the outdoors, tasting new foods, and capturing moments with his camera. But then, in middle school, things took an unexpected turn. He began drifting off mentally, displaying signs of being absent-minded, not fully present in his surroundings, and he stopped engaging in conversations or interactions with others. His school teachers would often raise concerns about his lack of social engagement. Devon would often daydream and found it hard to differentiate between his imagination and reality. But his parents Alan and Laura believed that a change of surroundings might help him come out of his shell. So after completing middle school, they enrolled him in a Jewish school named Longwood Lyman High School in Orlando, hoping it would help him become more social. However, things didn't quite work out as planned. The new environment felt suffocating for Devon, like it was too tight for him to breathe. This led him to drop out during the middle of his 10th grade year. This was also a time when Devon showed signs of anxiety, experiencing feelings of nervousness or unease. Devon's parents were deeply concerned about him, but they held on to the hope that he'd gradually find his place and grow comfortable in his surroundings. In an effort to help him, they arranged for him to live alone in a Tampa Palms apartment in 2016 when he turned 17. Interestingly, around this time, Devon was involved with a neo-Nazi group called the Atomwaffen Division. It's important to remember this detail when considering his move to the apartment. Devon did encounter challenges, but as time passed, he made an effort to settle in his new place. After a little while, 3 additional members from the same neo-Nazi group, namely Andrew Wunschek, who was 18 years old, Jeremy Himmelman, who was 22 years old, and Brandon Russell, who was 21 years old and also the leader of the group, moved in with Devon. They were able to live there without paying rent, which was a favorable deal for them. However, little did anyone know, this was just the beginning of a dark and troubling series of events. Coming back to the case, when the police reached Devon's apartment, they noticed that many people from the building had gathered there. This gave them a strong indication that something terrible had occurred. The apartment itself was in disarray, and inside, the bodies of the 2 roommates, Andrew and Jeremy, were on the floor covered in blood. Just as the police were about to begin their investigation, another roommate named Brandon Russell came forward. He explained to the police that he'd been away from the apartment all day, and upon his return, he discovered his roommates' lifeless bodies. He believed that someone had shot them. However, the police informed Brandon that they'd arrested Devon because he had admitted to killing his roommates. This revelation surprised and puzzled Brandon, who couldn't understand why Devon would take such an action. After examining the bodies, the police found gunshot wounds to the heads and chests of Andrew and Jeremy. Moreover, the bodies bore signs of physical confrontations, indicating that they might have fought prior to Devon shooting them. Both victims were shot using a WASR-10 assault rifle. As the police were getting ready to search the apartment, Brandon unexpectedly objected and tried to prevent them from doing so. He insisted that since Devon confessed to the murders, they should just put him in jail and there was no need for further investigation. According to Brandon, there was nothing suspicious in the apartment, just books and personal belongings. This strange behavior set off alarms for the police. They began to suspect that something was amiss. When they started searching, they stumbled upon some shocking discoveries that they never anticipated finding in a teenager's living space. These findings hinted at a much darker motive behind the murders. Among the items they found was literature promoting white nationalism and anti-government beliefs. Even more astonishing was the presence of a framed photo of Timothy McVeigh, who was responsible for the Oklahoma City bombing. However, the most alarming find was an assortment of guns, rifles, ammunition, and materials that could be used to make bombs. In the garage, the police uncovered some really dangerous materials, a highly explosive substance called HMTD, lots of ammonium nitrate, and homemade fuses. When they confronted Devon about these findings, he confessed to a disturbing plot. He revealed that their group had been planning potentially dangerous acts like terrorist attacks, perhaps targeting nuclear plants. All the evidence strongly suggested a significant and risky plan that could have impacted many individuals. So the police acted swiftly. They arrested Brandon and took both him and Devon to the Tampa police station for questioning.
I want to start this out with. Well, you know what? You'd be surprised, man. Unfortunately, most of the people that talk to me about this, they don't say stuff like that. So they themselves were not. Well, but I'll tell you what, I don't mean to interrupt. Yes, sir. But before we get into all that, yes, sir. Before we get into the meat and potatoes, so to speak, yes, sir. I have to read you some things and go over some formalities. Okay. Okay. Once my partner gets in here, we'll go that route, right? I'm going to start recording here, so it's all documented and memorialized, okay? Yeah.
During the interrogation, Devon Arthurs shared the most bone-chilling facts about the case and the actual reason behind the murders. It turned out to be much deeper than what the police initially suspected. The interrogation began with the usual introduction, and the detective made sure to inform Devon about his Miranda rights. Then the detective started by asking Devon about how he was feeling and what his mental state was like.
Before I do that, I want to make sure that I'm dealing with an individual here who has a clear mind. Are you under the influence of any narcotics or alcohol or any... I'm completely sober. Okay. No prescribed medication, no cold medicine, nothing at all? No. Okay. Have you ever been diagnosed with any kind of mental illness or anything like that might prevent you from having a conversation where you understand what I'm saying and I understand what you're saying? No, I don't. I've never been prescribed with that. But I wish I went to a hospital before this. I wish I had listened to my family and just
The investigator aimed to confirm whether Devon committed the murders while struggling with feelings of sadness or while under the influence of any commonly used drugs among his generation. They wanted to make certain that he was mentally capable of having a conversation and comprehending the situation. This was to ensure that he understood the nature of the interrogation process.
Before everybody, when we begin like this, when we go to the jail, can I please speak to the doctors there? They told me that I can talk to doctors when I get there. Of course. I don't run the jail. Yeah. But when we get there, we'll explain. Are you feeling any physical ailments right now? All we ever want is the honest truth. That's all right. I'll give you that. Okay. These people, I'll tell you exactly what happened today. Yeah, take it from the beginning, man. So I remember, I woke up.
Devon told them that on May 19th, 2017, he woke up and noticed that Andrew and Jeremy were occupied with some tasks while talking to each other. Due to Devon's history of being associated with a neo-Nazi group from a young age when he was just 14 years old, he formed a friendship with Andrew and Jeremy because they all held extreme beliefs. However, a few months before the events of May 19th, Devon made a significant change by converting to Islam. He made this change because he believed that embracing Islam would help him find a peaceful and calm state of mind. There were moments when Andrew and Jeremy would mock Devon for his decision to embrace Islam, but he usually brushed it off. However, on this particular day, their teasing affected Devon deeply. He couldn't control his feelings and engaged in a passionate argument with them. The situation escalated to a point where he lost control and, driven by intense emotions, used a rifle to shoot them. Overwhelmed by what he'd done, he left the apartment in a state of shock. Yet there were additional undisclosed reasons that Devon was expected to reveal.
Yeah, tell me about that. What's that all about?
Waffen Division is a terrorist organization. It's a neo-Nazi organization that I was a part of before I converted.
What's it called?
Waffen Division.
Okay.
And I remember my roommate, Brandon, he's alive, the guy that was in the American uniform.
Uh-huh.
I hope he gets his shit together. I hope he gets his life together. He's a good person. But the things that they were planning were horrible. They're planning bombings and stuff like that on countless people. They're planning to kill civilian life.
Well, were they specific in their plans?
Power lines, nuclear reactors, synagogues, things like that. And the reason why, I mention this is because it's self-evident. You go into the place, there's a giant Azov Regiment flag that's in the background. Azov Regiment is an organization in Ukraine, which is an NS movement that crucifies people and has harmed a lot of people, and I came directly from there. I was very, very angry about the coalition bombings. So, that day I was watching videos of infants that were killed by American bombs.
Which day was that, today?
Yeah, and that's what it was driving me crazy. It's that was getting me. And I was also seeing the posts that was being made in an encrypted chat by other members about how they want to kill blacks and how they want to kill
members of what?
The same organizations, yeah.
Which organization is that?
Waffen.
That one, the one that you were formerly a part of.
Yeah, formerly a part of. And I was living there because I was living primarily with the guy in the American uniform, the Brandon. And he's a decent human being that can be reasoned with.
What exactly did you say?
They would say stuff like, I want to blow up refugee ships. They would say stuff like they want to go target blacks, like how Dylan Roof did. These people, they were not just innocent people. They weren't just my roommates, is what I mean.
Have they ever done any bad things, specifically that you know about? Maybe that you were a part of, that you weren't part of?
I was never a part. We never targeted anybody, but we had plans. We had guys in the American military that literally would go to bases and steal huge amounts of equipment. We're talking Kevlar, night vision, stuff like that, for the intent of criminal activity, i.e., targeting government structures, targeting people.
This is part of the group that you were a part of? Or?
Yes, sir. Not to mention, the morality of this group and how these people think. I remember. I did this in the past. I remember when we would help Azov Regiment in Ukraine by hacking telecommunication networks that were held by the separatists, right? So we hacked factories and we shut down electricity. And I remember there was an article that a factory got shut down and 12 people had died, frozen to death, and I was horrified by that. I was absolutely mortified.
Because you were a part of that?
Yeah, I was mortified. I remember, and it was horrifying because I knew that nothing would ever come out of it. I would wake up each morning, my mom would tell me, good morning, and they'd have no idea. And I remember I brought this up to a few people that are part of the organization, and they just started laughing about it. They thought it was the funniest thing, and I was horrified by it. And it's I'm such an idiot for still living in that situation, for being in there, being at that apartment.
A short while ago, Devon was the person who'd taken the lives of 2 individuals. Yet his image suddenly changed to that of a hero who potentially prevented further harm. However, a question arose. If Devon was aware of their malicious intentions from the beginning, why didn't he inform the police after he converted to Islam and distanced himself from their group? Instead, he chose to wait, and ultimately, he believed that the only solution was to end their lives. This aspect of the story didn't align well with his claims of wanting to protect others. If his intentions were indeed positive, he could have come forward sooner. Clearly, Devon had much more to share, so the detective allowed him to talk without much interruption. the unsettling details Devon revealed would all be thoroughly investigated.
It's hard to describe. I wish that if I could go back and do something over, I would sign myself into a hospital to work about my anger issues and my rational thinking skills, which I don't think is at par of like.
But I think this goes beyond anger issues. I think it's something a little deeper for you. I think it's more of it's a passion that you're passionate about doing good for people.
At this point, the detective changed the way he talked to Devon using a method called the ego up technique. To use this technique, the interrogator adopts a tone of voice that's almost admiring or praising when talking about the suspect or the crimes they've committed. This is done in a way that seems believable. The purpose is to make the suspect feel proud of what they've done, which might encourage them to admit to their actions and reveal the real truth behind the situation.
Let me ask you this, and forgive me, but I'm just trying to. You're educating me in this whole process, so yeah. I'm going to ask questions as a student sitting here. That is, you believe you have a faith? You said. What is your faith?
I'm a Muslim.
Okay. Does that coincide with this organization you're part of?
No, not at all.
So, how long have you been a Muslim?
I've been a Muslim since June of 2016. That's why I was a part of it. It was mainly to try to get people away from this shit and try to basically.
That's when you first joined up?
No, this is when. No, I was already part of it when I converted. When I converted, I was like, I got it. While I'm in here, I can't just leave it. If I left it, then I'd probably be killed or something like that. But if I'd either be killed or something in that nature. But if I didn't do that, then when it comes down to it, like it's. Then I might as well try to convince people while I'm there, like almost, like basically convince people, like don't do this, don't throw your life away.
But you made no secret about it to even Brandon, I imagine, of your faith, right? They knew what you were about.
Yeah.
And they still tolerated you.
Yeah, they still tolerated. Yeah, they did. Barely.
Devon told the detective that his roommates tolerated him even though he was a Muslim. This raised a concern for the detective. If Devon's roommates had negative feelings towards people of his faith and had harmful intentions, it seems strange that they allowed him to stay with them. If his roommates were truly dangerous and plotting to harm many, it seemed odd that they didn't take any action against Devon. If they were capable of planning to kill numerous people, they could have easily harmed Devon and gone ahead with their sinister plan. This aspect of the story didn't quite fit together logically.
I'm telling you stuff that the FBI should also be hearing.
Okay.
And I'm telling you things that, agencies all over America, I'm not trying to sound like a schizo because I know that I'm trampling over words and stuff.
No, you're within control, man. You're good. Keep going.
And these people, I know like in Russia and Belarus and Ukraine, we were talking about people that are embedded with NATO forces and NATO's not even aware of it. People that literally crucify people and burn them to death in the middle of Ukraine because they're POWs captured captured from separatist forces. And it's hard. Like there's people in Germany basically planning to place IEDs and stuff like that on roads in Dunkirk and near Berlin and stuff like that to target refugees on buses and things like that.
I know we're talking on a broader scale, and I get. Can you bring me back to let's talk. Well, not just America. I'm going more specific now. Let's talk about your condo. The four of you guys in that condo. Let's back you up to when you converted. What led to your conversion? What was that epiphany you had when did you come across anything?
I remember I came across the Quran and started reading it. I was like, this is far better than Mein Kampf. This is far better than any of those.
How did you come across the Quran in the first one?
It was given to me. I remember I visited a mosque. I wanted to see what it was about. I wanted to see if what I was told was true. And I was wrong about what I had believed about those people. I was wrong about how I felt about certain races of people. I realized that, there's no point in having lingering hatred and stuff like that. There's no point in wanting to kill a man or a little girl just because she's black or Asian. And I remember I really held on to these beliefs. And that really clicked to me, and I started reading into it, and I found the miracles of the Quran and the things that really got it. And that's what really like sparked my interest into it. That's what really got me.
Did you have any guidance from anybody else that was maybe more familiar with the faith, or you kind of just self-taught?
Self-taught.
As Devon talked about his conversations, he shared that he'd changed his perspective and didn't see a reason to harm people just because of hate. He strongly disagreed with what his roommates believed. He even brought up schizophrenia, mentioning that he wasn't trying to sound like that. Devon truly believed that the killings he carried out were for a noble reason, and he didn't do anything wrong that deserved punishment. He felt sure the detectives would accept his story, which made him confident about being released.
What was their purpose for doing that?
Because they want to build the Fourth Reich. They're delusional. Man.
Okay.
And like absolutely delusional.
Are there drugs involved? I mean,
no, there's no drugs involved.
This is all unadulterated, just thought. This is just their irrational thought.
It's not just their irrational thought when they're like getting the explosives together. When they're like when they have a guy in the U.S. Army that re-enlisted specifically for the group.
This being Brandon?
No, not Brandon. This is somebody else in the Midwest, Colorado, I think.
Who's that?
Jason.
And Jason, last name?
I don't know his last name.
Okay.
But he re-enlisted. I'm just giving an example. Some of the shit.
Oh, okay.
Like he re-enlisted specifically for the group to go into his supply room and steal stuff, like steal night vision goggles, take huge metric tons of ammunition as time went on. He planned on doing that, and he did do that. He got Kevlar.
What about Brandon? Because Brandon's
Kevlar
currently in
he joined specifically for the knowledge and the training, and he wants to use that training against the government. He doesn't care about the United States. I mean, he literally had an American flag at the front door that he'd trample on every time that he'd walk in. Like literally, these people join the military specifically to get training, to get access to equipment, and get access to being able to kill people, and to be more efficient at doing so.
No evidence was discovered indicating that any form of training had actually occurred. Devon had provided a lot of information, and many things that he mentioned could have easily been obtained from the internet. Sorting out what was true from what was made up might take some time due to the complexity. Additionally, back in middle school, Devon exhibited signs of struggling with distinguishing between reality and fantasy. This could potentially be a factor if Devon had committed the murders while being influenced by a distorted perception.
Did you guys ever sit down together and plot out the operation? Yeah. You mentioned the alligator alley. Is there some plans that's in place?
It's not going to happen anymore.
But no, you've taken care of that. But I mean, where are those plans? Where were they found?
Plans were all said verbally. Things were not written down or typed specifically because of this reasoning. However, it's a giant map of the United States where we frequently go there and we would plan and we would look at like streets and roads and stuff like that.
I would not actually plot anything. It'd be just conversation.
Yes, verbal. And
I wouldn't go into that map and see things circled or
there's nothing circled
push pins put in certain targets or anything like that.
Nothing like that. Okay. And exactly because of this reasoning.
Following the interrogation, the detective was confident that Andrew, Jeremy, and Brandon were undoubtedly involved in planning something dangerous that could have harmed a whole community. However, it's important to acknowledge that Devon, despite having prevented a harmful event, still took the lives of 2 individuals. As a result, he needed to face legal consequences and be confined to jail. Brandon Russell faced arrest in 2017 on federal charges related to explosives and ended up serving 5 years in prison. He was released in 2022. Surprisingly, this year, in 2023, he found himself arrested once again. This time, federal authorities claimed he teamed up with a woman in Maryland for a plot involving an attack on an electrical power grid. This case is still in progress, leaving people intrigued about the unfolding developments. The murder case against Devon Arthurs stretched out for several years, mainly due to concerns about his mental well-being. There were 2 occasions when he was declared unfit to face the court proceedings and was sent to a state psychiatric hospital for treatment. After over a year of getting help, he returned to the local jail to wait for the trial. Mental health experts assessed him and found that Devon was possibly on the autism spectrum. He was also diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder, a mental illness that has aspects of both schizophrenia and mood disorders. In 2023, 6 years after the murders occurred, a defense lawyer named Maria Dunker shared in court that a mental health professional had recently assessed Devon and determined that he was mentally capable of admitting guilt. Devon Arthurs reached an agreement with state prosecutors and confessed to lesser charges, including 2 counts of second-degree murder and 3 counts of kidnapping. As part of this agreement, he accepted a 45-year prison sentence. Once he completes his prison term, he's also agreed to serve 15 years of probation. The judge, Christopher Sabella, further ordered him to follow any recommended mental health treatment after his release. During the proceedings, Devon, with a red beard and wearing a red jail uniform, sat upright and spoke at length. He offered apologies to the families of the 2 men he killed and strongly criticized extremism and hate. He expressed his desire to be an advocate against extremism and sent a message to the world to stay away from extremist groups. He conveyed his deep regret for everyone affected and everything that had transpired. Devon shared that he'd been influenced by extremist groups and mentioned his experiences with drugs. He pledged to spend his life helping others to avoid such negative influences. He believed he could honor Jeremy and Andrew by being a better person and acknowledging feeling regret for disappointing his family, himself, and his country. Jeremy Himmelman's sister, Riley Borghetti, observed the court proceedings via video call. She spoke directly to Devon and mentioned that he seemed to be dealing with mental illness. She didn't have insight into his life experiences that brought him here, but she wished him healing. After her brother's death, she committed to raising awareness against extremism. In a case that sheds light on the complex intertwining of extremism, mental health, and tragic consequences, Devon Arthurs' story serves as a chilling reminder of how lives can be profoundly affected. What are your thoughts on this case? What were the real factors that led him down this path? We'd love to hear from you. If there's a case you'd like us to cover, don't hesitate to drop your recommendations in the comment section below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more captivating true crime stories. Until next time, stay safe and keep your eyes peeled for the next mystery to unfold.